Okay, so we are live.
Aha.
Welcome back to the channel. And would you welcome our returning guest, Michael Peter Blatty?
Hello.
And this time we got him on camera instead of the avatar from last time.
That's my,
Um, so with the sunglasses, it's kind of a sensitivity for your eyes right now, right?
right.
Because I believe you had eye surgery.
Yeah, I had cataract surgery, and I have a real sensitivity to light right now. And so, if I don't wear these glasses, I'm going to be blinking constantly throughout the conversation, which is kind of disconcerting. So, I apologize
Gotcha.
that I'm like incognito. I'm not trying to
Oh,
be
no,
cool.
it's fine.
I'm not trying to be cool.
But yeah. So hopefully we got someone on. I'm trying to see if we can pull it up. Private chat.
Yeah.
I don't see anyone yet. Let's try this out.
Yeah.
Type us in.
Don't count on me for technical expertise. Believe me.
Oh no, that's fine.
Mm.
This is my first live, so I'm kind of like it's a big learning curve for.
Mm-hmm. If you hear the chomping noise in the background, unfortunately, is my pig. So I hope he'll.
Oh no, that's fine.
Pipe down.
So we'll have to tell everybody to keep away because the sow is yours.
Right. Yeah.
I think you should put that on your page. Just put it overhead. A photo of your pig.
Yeah.
What's your pig's name?
Puggles.
Puggles.
Puggles, otherwise known as Hamlet.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Hamlet.
It was for the kids, when they were small. He's 10 years old. We got him when the kids asked if we could buy a little piglet for them. And he was only about 15 pounds at the time. Now he's about 200. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. 200. So he's fairly a big pig.
He's not an American. He's like a Vietnamese pot-belly pig, but he's pretty big.
Oh.
He's pretty big now. Yeah.
It's been a while since I lived in West Virginia, where we did have a lot of hogs and pigs. And
for eating.
6 or 7, they're humongous.
For eating, right? I mean, you raise them to eat them.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I had some really bad experiences with that because we were buying pigs, and I remember having to cross this plank, and just below us were all these hogs, and they just looked like they just had this look in their eyes, like they were just wanted to eat me. I'm just a little 5 to 6 year old.
Yeah.
But I always remembered that. So.
Well, yeah. I don't want to go on and on about the pig, but most of the hogs that were bought, his brothers and sisters were bought to be slaughtered and eaten, but we bought him specifically as a pet. So we've had him for 10 years now.
Oh, gotcha. Anyway. Okay, well, I think I haven't seen anybody pop up yet, but it says that I have 5. If anybody wants to write something in the chat, let me know that you're there. We're going to go ahead and start.
I think people are out Christmas shopping, to be honest.
Yeah. I got comments, and I'm looking in private chat. So just in case anybody's either on side.
Yeah.
Or in coffee on. Just to let you know, we're going to. He is here. He just said he's here. I'm going to start with the initial questions that I had asked probably about a month ago, and we kind of went over a little bit. So we'll start with that.
Sure.
So this comes from Real Falcon BMS Brazil. I think that's how he pronounces it. What experiences did you have with your father throughout the making of The Exorcist? What did you discuss, expect, and what was his reaction after the film came out?
Oh, okay. Well, I was an undergrad at Georgetown University, which was my father's college. I was an undergrad from 70 to 74. And the book came out in 71, and the film crew came in 72, in October of 1972, to do the exterior shots on the campus and at the house and the fall down the stairs. So I was there. I was just by a crazy coincidence. I was a student at the time. So I watched most of the filming here, there in Georgetown, which went on for about 2 to 3 weeks. I had classes, so I missed some of it, but I saw a lot of the key scenes, falling down the stairs and Ellen Burstyn's walk through Georgetown, and just all of the exterior stuff. I had a small part as one of the student protesters in the Crash Course, the movie within the movie at the beginning.
Right. Yep.
And so I would see my dad sometime before and after and during the filming. So that was my experience. I did get to New York to the sound stage and to the refrigerated set and met Max von Sydow there. But I was only there briefly. So my experience of the making was almost entirely in Georgetown. What did my dad think? I think my dad was very excited with how the film was coming out. I know I never saw the rushes daily, but my dad was watching them with Friedkin, and he was very pleased with how the film came out. Of course, there's been a lot of discussion. He was very upset and disappointed over the cuts that Friedkin made in the scene toward the end before the fall down the steps. But a lot of people know about that. But yeah, he was very excited and very happy. He was the producer of the film, so he was on set all the time. I remember at the time there was a lot of concern about the cost. I mean, it's pretty amazing to me now. I think the budget was like $9 million. I could be off by $1 million for the entire film. It ended up costing something like $12 million. And I remember as early as October, the studio was constantly calling William Friedkin and telling him he had to do less filming. He had to hurry up. He was spending too much money. And I think my dad, as the producer, was sort of on the same page as Warner Brothers. They were was telling Friedkin, come on, do we have to do the same shot like 100 times? Because that's what he was doing, is my recollection. Every shot he was doing multiple times. Right. And it was taking a long time and costing a lot of money. And I just remember there was a constant complaint from Warner Brothers about how much it was costing and how long it was taking.
That seemed pretty normal, I would think.
Isn't it amazing, though, when you look back, 1971, 72, $10 million was considered a huge amount of money.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
It's crazy. Definitely. Yeah.
It's funny because unrelated to this, I was actually looking up some stuff on the Creature of the Black Lagoon, and its box office was like $1 million. That was it.
Yeah.
That was like what, 1954 or something like that. I don't recall the date. But okay, we got one more question here. JP2689 asks, do you have anything to share about the 9th configuration, especially regarding Joe Spinell and the film's production?
Wow.
Did you have any experience behind the whole 9th configuration? Did you visit set or anything?
Well, I don't, sadly, I really didn't see any of the filming. All the filming was done most of it was done in Budapest and at Elf Castle in Germany. And then I think it was in a lot of the post-production was done in North Carolina. So my dad was away and I didn't see any of the filming. I had virtually nothing to do with it. I had been to Elf Castle previous to my dad's having seen it for the first time. Right. And it's funny. The one thing I'll mention from the filming is because they were filming in Budapest, there's the bar scene at the end, where the big fight transpires.
Okay.
And all of the extras in the dance scene were from Budapest. None of them spoke English. And so I saw the take before they dubbed it and added the sound and so on. And all you saw was like people from Budapest, like shuffling along the floor. And occasionally you would hear them speak their language. And it was just, I don't know, it was just funny.
Oh, yeah.
It was supposed to be filmed in the Pacific Northwest or maybe in Malibu.
Yeah, that would really throw things.
But and it's funny because a lot of members of my dad's family were in that film. I mean, my dad was in it. His wife at the time was in it. One of my half brothers was in it. There's a scene of Cain wandering in a field and a little boy wandering in the field. And that was my half brother, Billy.
Oh, that's funny.
So my dad's wife at the time, her name was Linda, was the waitress in the bar.
Mm-hmm.
who gets roughed up by the, the bikers. So, I mean, these are just little details that nobody would know, but it always amuses me to see them.
I think that's pretty interesting. Was
But I'm
Lennon
sorry
a
that I can't really
tennis
answer. No, I
player?
had really nothing to do with it.
Yeah. Would he check in from time to time? While he was out there?
I don't think so. I don't
No,
think
he
so.
just stayed out there and he just
He
came
was
back.
he was pretty busy. Yeah, no, I don't think I had much contact with him at all.
Huh.
When he was working on projects, he was totally obsessed with them.
Right.
Totally involved. I know when he came back, he did some post-production at, I think, Todd AO Sound in Los Angeles. And I remember sitting in on a couple of sessions, when they were just adding the sound to it. But yeah, not, I'm racking my brains, but not really much involvement.
Now, Linda, was she the tennis player?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's the funny thing that, that's how my dad, my mother was my dad's first wife. He was married 4 times. So,
Right.
when I was at Georgetown, my dad had already remarried once and been divorced. And while he was filming the movie, that's how he met the woman who became his 3rd wife. And she was an extra on the film and is one of the tennis players that you see, the blonde with pigtails, in the scene where Kinderman and Caris are discussing the death of Burke Dennings. In the background, They walk by a tennis court and you see them playing, and one of them became my dad's wife. That tennis court sadly is gone. I used to play on that court on the Georgetown campus. It's now was torn down and replaced by a new student dorm.
Gotcha. Okay. Let's go ahead and move on to this next question real quick.
Hey, by the way, if I go on and on, don't hesitate to cut me off.
No, that's fine.
I won't be offended.
It's all good. So, Dude 08VQ. I don't know where these names come from.
Are these people afraid to be identified?
No, I don't know. Maybe it sounds good.
All right.
Would you be interested in directing a possession film? If so, how would you go about it, and what would be your take on it?
Would I be in? Well, first of all, I'm not in the movie business, so I would know nothing about directing. So yeah.
But we did talk a little bit about screenplays, because you did say you had some ideas on some stuff. So I'm going to
yeah, but I mean, about directing a possession film. I taught in high school for some years, and I always enjoyed participating in plays when I was in school, and so I directed a few little student productions. But yeah, in terms, I've never dreamt of directing. I wouldn't know what I was doing. Possession films per se do not interest me at all. I mean, what I was saying is Warner Brothers one day out of the blue came to me and said, "Hey, I'll give you a few $1 million if you will direct this."
Right.
I'd say, "Yeah, well, sure, I'll do my best." That's the only circumstance under which that would ever happen. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that. I can totally see that.
The thing is that obviously, when you have a parent in the film business, you have a lot of opportunities to get in the business yourself, especially if your parent's been successful, as my dad was. I could have gotten any kind of job in the film business. I know at one time my dad was asking me if I wanted to work under Franco Zeffirelli,
Oh, wow.
Well, not as an assistant director, but I guess something to do with editing. And did I want to be part of his crew and this and that? And it just, I shied away from trying to be in the film business because it wasn't really my passion. And I didn't want to do it just because, my dad could get me a job. And I didn't want people to say, oh, yeah, I know why he got his job because, his dad got. So I always avoided,
Right.
Anyway, but it interests me, filmmaking, and certainly movies. I love movies,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. I was going to go that route and something changed. I was planning on going to Berkeley, but then I was rerouted in a way. I had a bigger interest in other stuff.
Interestingly, two of my 4 sons are in the film business in various aspects of the film business.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah, and
awesome.
they didn't get their job because of the name, or my dad, didn't help them get a job. They just
It
did it
was
on
kind
their
of
own.
in the blood a little bit.
Well, I don't know. Well, I think it's just they grew up in Los Angeles, and if you're in LA, I
Oh,
mean, there's a pretty
mhm.
good chance you're going to be involved probably in some aspect of filmmaking. But
Wow, that is awesome.
yeah,
That would make a good conversation right there on its own. Let's check with Hector Savage. He's got a few questions, quite a bit. What careers? This is funny because it kind of leads into what you were
yeah.
talking about. What careers did you embark on after college?
Wow.
How do you think the Exorcist? How do you think the Exorcist film would have turned out under Stanley Kubrick?
Yeah.
And would Stacy Keach have made a convincing Caris?
Okay, so in my careers, well, I primarily worked as a teacher, sometimes in special needs schools, teaching English.
Oh wow!
And I also did some freelance writing when I was I lived for a number of years in Salem, Massachusetts, not because of any occult things or because of the witchcraft, but just because I love the Boston area, and it was a seacoast town. I was very interested in Hawthorne, who of course had lived in and written in
Right.
Salem. So while I was there, I did a lot of freelance for the Salem News, their local paper, and so I did a lot of features pieces on Hawthorne and Dickens and various people. And I worked for an airline for a number of years. And and nothing really particular interest. I never had a real career. It was just various jobs. Now let's see. The second question was, remind me.
Oh, how do you think the Exorcist film would have turned out under Stanley Kubrick?
Well, first of all, I have to say, I mean, Friedkin did a brilliant job.
Right.
It's almost hard to imagine the film being better under having been directed by anybody else. However, having said that, I mean, Kubrick is just an incredible, as we all know, director.
Mm-hmm.
And I would love to have seen An Exorcist directed by Stanley Kubrick. I mean, The Shining is one of my favorite, certainly horror films, maybe favorite films ever. And of course, I love so many of Kubrick's films. So, there's various reasons that he didn't do it. I think one was that he had other projects in the works, and Warner Brothers had a very specific schedule. And Kubrick was like, "Well, I can't do it now, but I could do it in 6 months." And I believe he also wanted to move the scene out of Georgetown to some other location, and my dad was
Right.
adamantly opposed to that. He felt that
Right.
was essential.
Yeah, I would
So,
see that
but
happening.
given my druthers, I would rather have seen it directed by Kubrick, because I think it would have been just unbelievable film, but it would have been totally different.
Oh, definitely.
And it probably
Definitely.
wouldn't have exactly been The Exorcist. It would have been Kubrick's The Exorcist.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, and then the third call, Stacy Keach. How would he have been well? I mean, I think Keach is such a great actor. I think he would have been fabulous as Caris. But I mean, it's hard for me to imagine somebody doing a better job in the part than Jason Miller did. I think he was just
Right.
incredible in the part. He had the look, he had the intensity, everything. Just a great actor. And but I think Keach certainly could have done the job. I think Miller had the look of Caris, maybe more than Keach would.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, also I think Brando was considered, believe it or not, and
I would have a hard time with Brando.
Jack
There's
Nicholson.
too much
I mean,
Brando in it.
yeah, one thing I will say, it's a minor thing, but I almost feel like Jason Miller was almost a little bit too small, a little bit too
I was
short.
going to say that because it's like, comparing Stacy Keach. I'm sure Stacy Keach is much taller than Jason Miller.
Yeah, I'm not
Bigger,
sure.
bigger.
I don't remember, but bigger. But it's
Mhm.
not that obvious. But I always, especially when he's standing next to Marin, he looks kind of small. It looks a little small for Carrie. My dad was considering doing.
Yeah, I know.
wanted to.
And he,
I
I
don't know
think
exactly what happened. I don't know whether he bowed out on his own or if Friedkin basically said no.
probably
You
I
know.
can see that happening.
I
Probably I can
don't
see that
certainly
happening.
don't think he could have done a better job than Jason Miller.
It probably would have been a different situation at the end of the film had your dad been in, because do you think he would have been apt to grab up Reagan and start beating her up at the toward the end? I just can't see that.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
He'll probably
You
say,
know,
"No, there's another way to do this."
you don't want to, you don't want an author playing a major part in a film. It's constantly, it's okay if they do a little bit part, as my dad does as the producer, and he has a little walk on, as you know, in Ninth Configuration. Uh,
Right.
but it's just disconcerting. It's like, like the flowers of the August moon, or whatever the uh, the title of the film was, to see Scorsese do the
Hmm.
narration at the end. I didn't like that at all. It's like, why do they do it? I know that Hitchcock liked to have a little part, but
Sure.
I
Sure.
think
He was
authors should stay out of their movies, frankly. But
right.
you
Stephen
know,
King. It's Stephen King. I think the one that comes to mind most is that Creep Show, where he actually played a part. He played Jordy Verrill.
oh really?
Finding the
That's
meteor,
funny.
he's all like, "That's a meteor. I'll be dipped in shit if that ain't a meteor."
I guess that would be
And it's
fun
like
to see.
feels
I
very
haven't seen the
natural for
film,
him,
but
and you can totally,
yeah.
that's just him normal.
Well, I mean, I think that, for instance, I think Tarantino's a great director, but I hate when he tries to play a tough guy in
Oh
the film.
yeah,
It's just ludicrous. I
it
mean,
is
it's like,
funny.
come on.
It is funny.
Yeah.
I'm going to move on. He's got
Yep.
another question here, another set. So he's got the majority here set. Did your father have any other actors in mind for The Exorcist 3 Kinderman besides George C. Scott?
Kinderman. This is a case where I'm sorry that I don't recall. I
He
don't
might have come
recall.
up in passing or something, maybe, or maybe
Yeah.
not.
I'm sure, unfortunately, I don't know the answer. I'm sure there must have been other actors that were almost with every role that my dad, wrote a script for. There were multiple people being considered or being asked.
Oh, hold
I
on.
know I can say about Scott that my dad just loved him as an actor, as I do, beginning with basically, Dr. Strangelove and Patton and various other films. And so, yeah, I don't know the answer, but there must have been other people. And somebody
Oh,
probably knows the answer, but I don't.
hmm. Okay. How about this one? Would Exorcist 3 have been better without the studio's intervention? Would the cut that your dad originally wanted to put out be a
Mhm.
better film than what we have now?
Oh, yeah, I absolutely think it would have been. Um, but on the other hand, I understand why the studio insisted upon, the
Right.
exorcism and the changes. So it was an awkward thing. I mean, my dad had been hired as a director, and he wasn't the producer, so it wasn't his decision. I know he really hated to add that exorcism at the end. Some film goers love the exorcism though,
Right.
and but this is the problem, which you put out a film that's basically advertised as a sequel to The Exorcist,
Right.
and you almost have to have an exorcism in it. Otherwise, people feel ripped off. And that was the argument the studio made, with my
Right.
dad. We were calling it Exorcist 3. We have to have an exorcism. So, but yeah, to answer the question again, no, I mean, it's a much better story film without an and of course the novel, for those who have read the novel, they know there's no exorcism in the novel. And in fact, the end of the novel is one of the most beautifully written scenes of any of my dad's work. you know it
Hmm.
just ends in a kind of a hamburger joint which used to exist in Georgetown, when Kinderman is in there with Atkins or one of his assistants, and a kind of a homeless person comes in begging for hamburgers, and the cook kind of reluctantly bags up some burgers and gives it to him, and the homeless guy walks out, and then Kinderman turns to his friend and says, "Hurrah for Karamazov," which the point being just, you know, this is the goodness that there is in the world, you know, that people will
Right.
good things for strangers. And this is, which is the whole theme of the novel, was that this is going to save mankind. This is going to, you know, what's going to lead us to, you know, nirvana, is people being kind to one another. So that's all lost in the spectacular exorcism at the end of the movie. But
Oh,
again,
yeah.
but again, I understand it was justified, you know.
Right. So you're saying that hamburger place is gone now?
Well, the building is still there. It was called it's gonna go out of my Little Tavern. It was called
Oh,
Little Tavern, and there were two of them. It was like a, what are those the little packaged hamburgers that you get? Like, there's another company that sells them.
what kind of like a White Castle?
Yeah, it was the equivalent of White Castle.
Huh.
Right. That they did these cheap, you know, little tiny burgers, and you would get
Right.
multiple of them. Well, there were two, if I remember, there were two when I was a student there, outlets, one right on Wisconsin Avenue in Georgetown, and another one on M Street, pretty close to the M Street steps.
Okay.
And
Mhm.
that was the one that the scene is set in Legion, and the building is
Right.
still there. All I can say is if you walk to the right and down M Street, having descended the MC Street steps, go about 2 blocks. It's on the left side. It's unmistakable. If you've seen the movie, you recognize the building, but it's like a quaint Tudor style, like something you might see out of Dickens, London. But
Right.
the scene was set there. And I'm sure that when my dad was filming there, he went in there often for burgers. I know we went in at least once or twice, you know, good burgers
Hmm.
and cheap. You get
Yeah.
a whole bag full for like a couple of bucks, you know.
Oh, that's not bad.
Yeah.
And they were good, huh?
It's
That's good to
sadly
know.
that it's sad that it's gone.
Um,
I don't know what's in there now.
well, hopefully, if I can get down there next year, I'll probably check it out. Probably ask you around
Absolutely.
where it would be. So yeah, that'd been kind of a neat place to check out. But
Yeah.
yeah, back to Exorcist 3. Would you have had a? I'm just going to insert this real quick since we're on
Yeah.
the topic. Would you have a problem with accepting Brad Durf as Father Caris as well? Because I know that at one point they wanted to use him straight through for as Father Caris and play the the other personality, the Gemini killer. Now, for me, I would have had a hard time wrapping my head around Brad Dorff being Father Karras and without Jason Miller being in there. And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, you know, I'm trying to remember like the scenario, how it happened. I mean, because originally it was just going to be Brad Dourif, right?
Yeah.
And of course, he's great in the part. I think, you know, some of his scenes are just really great acting.
Hmm.
And then I think that's when the Robinson, the head of Morgan Creek, started getting really uncomfortable that it wasn't looking enough like an exorcism movie, you know, and that they had to have Jason Miller appear, and that's when they, you know, got Miller to come down and do the scenes, and then they had that sort of, he morphs into Jason Miller, and you know, back and forth, which is
Right.
all very very awkward, and you know, I'm not sure it really works. I mean, I never liked that. I guess for myself, since Miller was not in a condition to do the entire, you know, role, I think I
Right.
probably would have liked to see just Dorff playing, you know, playing Karis, the Gemini killer. It's also awkward. There's been conversation online, as you know, I think, recently about the choice of the actors to play Dyer and Kinderman, you know, in Exorcist 3, and how they don't
Right.
look at all alike. And I agree. I mean, it might seem like a minor thing, but if you know The Exorcist, the first film, well, it's just hard to accept that, for me at least, hard for me to accept that uh, George C. Scott is Kinderman, that he's the
Yeah.
same character. You just have to say, okay, it almost would have been better if he was presented as a different guy, you know, a different guy
But you know,
who took
it's
over
hard,
for
especially when
Kinderman,
someone
you know?
passes away and you can't
Yeah.
replace. You know, can't just dig
I
them up.
think for myself, you know, I don't know. Yeah, you know, all the considerations that go into these things, it's complicated. I would
Yeah.
much rather, of course, have seen if Lee J. Cobb had lived. It would have been fabulous. But he had died 10 years previous to that. I would have
Right.
liked to see them get a couple of good actors who looked more like the original characters, but a little bit older. Like, surely they could have gotten a Dyer who looked more like Father O'Malley than, Ed Flanders.
Do you think he brought on Ed Flanders because he worked with him before?
I think that's it. I think I wasn't there, as I say, on the set of Ninth Configuration, Killer
Mm-hmm.
Kane, but I think they became friends, or my dad really admired him. Of course, he's really fine. Was a fine actor, but I just can't watch those scenes for myself. And Exorcist 3, and accept that this is Father Dyer. I can't. I can't get into it.
There's one thing I was watching that. I think there's a Blu-ray of The Exorcist 3. I can't remember who put it out. I want to say Shudder or one of those. I'll have to check again, but they had the behind the scenes, and apparently there was an uncredited actor who kind of sat in for Jason Miller during shots of the exorcism in makeup to make him look like Jason Miller was there.
Oh, interesting.
I think it was parts where there was no lines, where he was just kind of sitting and reacting to what was going on. So I thought that was interesting. I don't hear too much about that.
Yeah, this brings back a memory. It's maybe unconnected, so I won't go on and on. But when my dad was rehearsing, getting ready to film the Ninth Configuration, which I think originally came out as Twinkle Twinkle Killer Kane, I think. I could be wrong, but anyway, there were so many versions of that movie, I can't remember. None of them did well, But I got a call one night from my dad, and he said, "Oh, hey, I've got someone who, I thought you might like to talk to." Had no idea who it was. And on came this British voice, this actor, and it was Nicol Williamson.
Oh, wow.
And they were rehearsing for Killer Kane because, as you probably know, Williamson was originally to play Kane. And who's the actor who was originally to play Cutshaw? His name just flew out of my head. Michael Moriarty.
Okay. Yeah, so, I wouldn't remember.
Yeah, that was the original cast was Nicol Williamson and Michael Moriarty. Both great actors. And, Williamson, I had seen in Stratford, because I had seen a lot of Shakespearean theater. I had seen him play not Hamlet. Williamson was my favorite Hamlet. I don't know if you ever saw his Hamlet. It's incredible.
No, I don't think so.
But I had seen him on stage in Macbeth. So I was this huge fan of Nicol Williamson. So this guy comes on. I go, "Well, okay, who are you?" And he goes, "Oh, this is Nicol Williamson." I go, "Oh my God, no, you're kidding me." And so I got to talk to them and to Michael Moriarty. And I mean, I can say, it doesn't matter. It sounded like they were all totally smashed. I couldn't think why else my dad would call me and say, "Hey, you might want to talk to this guy." Anyway, I was so disappointed.
Hey, call my son up. Here, tell it to him.
But it's interesting, though. It is a tie to Exorcist 3 because, of course, Nicol Williamson was brought back to play Father Morning. And
okay. Oh, yeah.
So that's a connection.
I didn't think about that.
So I think when things didn't work out, my dad felt that the chemistry between Moriarty and Nicholson was not good. And maybe Nicholson did not have a convincing American accent. I don't know.
Right.
But that's when they switched to Stacy Keach. And it was always a swapping. And as you know, Stacy Keach was supposed to play Caris.
Right.
And at the last second, Friedkin came up with Jason Miller and they had to tell him sorry, which must have been pretty distressing because everybody knew that was going to be a big film, The Exorcist.
Right.
Well, those were really coveted parts. Not that Stacy Keach desperately needed a big part because he was always successful. He was such a good actor. But anyway, so I think my dad always felt guilty. So I'm sorry I didn't use you for this, but I'm going to put you in this film,
Right. I remember anytime I think about Stacy Keach in the 70s, there was a film where he played a cop, I believe. And I think George C. Scott was in it too.
Yeah, I
want to say it was about 71. Maybe I'm wrong. And it's eating up my brain because I can't remember what it was called.
It wasn't one of these. Oh, yeah. Was it set in Los Angeles?
I don't
Yeah,
recall, but I can just see
yeah,
kind of like flashbacks of a few things from it, but just kind of in close up.
yeah.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
I
I
think it was
don't
like
know.
something about the Blue Saints or
Oh, the wait,
I
wait,
thought,
wait, the Blue Marble? No?
I thought there was Saints in the name. I'd have to go back and look it
Yeah,
up. But anytime I'm thinking about Keach in the 70s, I think about that. But then if he were to be Jason Miller, he wouldn't have been that like face that you don't recognize or that new face that
right,
Friedkin would have wanted. But maybe it
right.
was like maybe it was he was not too well known enough to where he would have been able to pull it off. Oh, one more
Right.
question from Hector here. What are your thoughts on your father's interest in EVP and paranormal? Do you have any other favorite horror movies? I don't think you were really big on the horror movies, if I remember right.
Well, I'll answer that question first. As a kid, I loved horror movies. I
Oh,
just
okay.
watched them
Mhm.
constantly. I loved Famous Monsters of Filmland. I would go out on my bike and get it faithfully. I guess it was every month, pour over it. I even wrote, I guess it's because I knew at the time that my dad was a screenwriter, but I remember starting but not finishing a screenplay when I was about 8 years old. And I think it was called The Mummy's Hand because
Oh,
every other part of the mummy of the body had been used in other mummy films. I remember my screenplay was to be called The Mummy's Hand. So
that's kind of
no,
cool.
I always loved horror films. I sort of lost interest in them in adulthood. I mean, I still see like the big ones, like The Shining and
Sure.
what are some the Alien.
Right.
I still enjoy a really good horror film, but I'm not like an aficionado of horror films. In other words, I haven't seen any of the Friday the 13th films. I haven't seen any of the Halloween films. I have no interest in seeing them. Like my dad, I don't think it's because that was my dad's attitude, but I think my dad also, like as a child, was kind of liked horror and so on, but then lost his interest. And he he never read horror. He never went to see horror films.
Right.
But I'm not against them. I think there've been some great ones. And when I think of my favorite horror films, I think The Shining might be my favorite. I mean, it's
Yeah, I can believe it. We had brought that
back
up
and forth.
before.
I go back and forth between The Exorcist and The Shining.
Right.
Uh, and just not that you asked, but what I have always found the scariest film of all time. When I was a kid, it was Invaders from Mars. Invaders from Mars, and also the Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the original one.
Right.
I remember.
Invaders from Mars, is that the one that's got like the big alien head in like it looks like a
Yeah,
glass or something?
yeah.
Yeah, that one.
It's like the kids
Yeah.
go out and there's flying saucers have landed in the
Yeah.
field and they're taking people, and yeah. But I remember as a kid having seen the Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the original. I remember one night I couldn't sleep because every 2 minutes I was checking under my bed to make sure there wasn't a pot under there. But
Oh.
but to me, the
Mhm.
scariest film, I'm not saying it's best, because I think that the best horror films of all time are The Shining and The Exorcist, and probably The Exorcist being number one. But for
Right.
me, the scariest film I ever saw was Alien, the first
It's the
Alien.
first one. Yeah.
But I'm
Hmm.
not saying it's the best. But to me, that's the scariest horror movie I've ever seen. Anyway.
Right. Yeah, I can believe that. What was your thoughts on the Hammer films when they came out?
Oh,
You
well,
know,
I loved
pay
all that stuff.
attention.
Like I say, when I was in LA, there was a guy who hosted horror movies, called Jeepers Keepers. And then there was also the first Elvira, I think. And I
Right.
used to watch those shows endlessly, late at night. And I remember on Saturdays when we lived in the Valley in Encino, there was the Encino Theater, and they used to every Saturday have just a whole series of horror movies, usually the Peter Lorre and all that Edgar Allan Poe stuff, The Raven and The Black Cat and so on.
Right.
And my mom used to drop me off, and I would just watch them all day with my sisters. So yeah, I've always loved
Wow.
horror, but modern horror, it just doesn't interest me. I don't understand. I don't even understand the obsession that some people have with them. I'm not putting it down, but I don't get it. I don't get it. Yeah.
Maybe some of the viewers can give you some recommendations. I did see,
Yeah.
what was it? Where Evil Lurks seems to be a really good one. I
Ah,
really enjoyed it. It's it's a foreign film. I forget where it came out of. I'll probably remember by the end of this. It's always
yeah.
like that. Here we go. We got a question from Royal Blessings 436.
Ooh.
Did your father ever contemplate making The Exorcist 2 with the same characters, and what would have happened with Reagan and Chris? And I
And
think
what
we
would have
kind of
happened with
covered
Reagan?
that. Yeah, I think we kind of covered that before.
And then I should go back because I don't think I answered the question about my dad's interest in the paranormal.
Yeah, yeah.
But,
Let's
but
answer
anyway,
that real
I'll
quick.
answer this one first. Is my dad never considered that I can recall doing an Exorcist 2. He felt like I remember asking him, because he told me that Warner Brothers was after him to do it, and his publisher wanted him to do a sequel. And I said, "Well, Dad, why not?" And he said, "Son, the story is done. I've written The Exorcist. Why would I want to write it again?" I mean, in other words, his attitude was, I said what I wanted to say.
Right.
And of course, he made a ton of money on the movie and the book. He didn't need to make more money. And I mean, I always admired him for that. The fact that he could have just cashed in easily and instead wanted to do new things and different things. So I don't think he ever considered it. So I don't think he ever had any storyline in mind. As I think years later, he wanted to do a miniseries and wrote the script
Yeah.
for it.
Right.
And why that fell through, I don't know. I read the script. It was great. It would have included all of the aspects of the novel that had to be cut out of the
Right.
Exorcist. Why it's never been made, I don't get it. I know that Friedkin didn't want to direct, didn't want to, like my dad, he didn't want to do essentially the same thing again, which is to his credit. So, but I wish that had been made while my dad was still alive. Maybe one day somebody
Yeah.
will do a new. I wouldn't be opposed to a new Exorcist that incorporated all the elements that are in the novel. I think it would be great.
Yeah, it seems like a miniseries would probably have been best approach on that. I mean, I can see certain like you could have a whole episode with just Kinderman and focusing on his investigation portion. All the
Right.
things he had to go through. I could see that.
And all the
If you
red
do it right.
herrings, all the
Yeah.
red herrings, which as you know, they dispensed with them when they made The Exorcist, because Friedkin said to my dad, we can't have people suspecting it might be Carl or it might be,
Right.
Sharon, because everybody knows that she's possessed and that these other guys didn't do it, which makes sense. But unfortunately, those were elements of the novel that were really intriguing, that were really kind of fun, because
Right.
it was a mystery story, for a long time, like who was doing this, who's responsible. So, but to go back just quickly to the thing about
Yeah, let's go back to
ESP,
that
and
real quick.
I had an interest in that. My dad always interested, his mind always open to the idea of extrasensory perception and dreams. And I had a number of personal experiences with dreams that I felt were like predictive of the future. So I, for a long time, believed that there was something. My dad, at some point, I kind of lost my belief in that kind of stuff. But my dad always was open to the possibility of all these things. He did all these tests with tape recordings. He thought that he
Yeah.
was in touch with spirits and so on. I was never convinced. He used to play the tapes for me, and I would say, "Dad, I don't hear anything." And he would get very annoyed, like, "You can't hear that? What's wrong with your ears?"
So was this like about 1972 when he was doing the film?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I came across and I'm working on a video on it. I came across a episode of David Letterman
Oh, I saw that.
where he showed up on David Letterman
Yeah.
and he was talking about that particular book that was
Yeah.
mentioned to him. Hold on a second.
Yeah. Yes.
It was Breakthrough.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
This one here. I don't know if you can.
Oh.
Does that reverse? No, it's straight. And I thought I'd take a look at it, and it does reflect in the film when Caris is listening to the tapes or the reversal, because every time he plays it, rewinds and comes back, it's just slightly different.
Yeah.
So I was going to focus on that. Originally, I was going to bring it up that, oh, the demon's probably messing with Caris's head. And then when that episode popped up in my feed, I was like, wait a minute, this is kind of like reflecting on some real stuff from your dad.
Well,
So
in
that's,
Legion, in the novel Legion, there's a
yeah.
whole chapter in which uh, Amphortis, is it Amphortis? Is that the name of the character who's doing the experiments with the tapes?
I
One
don't
one
recall.
of the characters is, and it's all my dad. It's all the descriptions of the how he did it, and it's kind of like
Yep.
an instruction manual for his readers and how to do it. My dad was doing that. He had a soundproof room created in his house in Malibu, and he had all these tape recording experts come and give him the highest end equipment. And he used to go in there for like hours, and I was afraid he was going to go literally crazy, with his obsession with it. And then you mentioned the David Letterman tape, which I saw recently, and I
And
found
they were talking about that chapter in the
but I think
episode.
my dad in that thing comes off as a total.
I know it seemed like, and when they started doing the tape and then he was going to do the playback, it was like the first thing that came to mind was, oh, this isn't going to go good.
Yeah. If you remember watching that, he becomes very impatient with
Yep.
David Letterman. Of course, he's just trying to make jokes and be kind of lighthearted. My dad was deadly serious, and I was very embarrassed watching that segment because I think my dad comes off as a total nut job. I'm afraid,
I've actually got and I probably brought it up before. I've got a video that I did when I was recording on my other channel that I thought was EVP, and it's on this mic. And I was recording it like 3 a.m. in my kitchen. And so, yeah, if you're interested, I could probably send you a link to the video if you want to listen to it, because I've got those moments of air where it sounds like there's a conversation in the background.
But see, here's the thing about the whole tape recording thing, and I know there have been books written about it and so on. The idea of a disembodied spirit somehow being able to manifest itself on something physical on a recording tape, to me, it makes no sense. I mean, yeah, I know there's mysteries that we don't understand. There's so many things we don't understand, but to me, it's ludicrous, the idea of that a spirit could in any way manifest itself physically.
Right.
I mean, it's just crazy. To me, it's nuts. Now, my dad, one time, we were discussing some topic like this, and I was expressing skepticism, which I am quite a skeptic. And it used to really annoy my dad. And one day he said to me, he said, son, you're just what I would call an intellectual bigot. That's what he said. Intellectual bigot. And I thought, well, I can't argue with that. I guess maybe I am, I just don't believe that stuff. I don't, but I'm not saying I'm right. You know what I mean? It's like people might be right. I just, I'm not. My dad was, I think it's because he was such an imaginative person. He was open to all kinds of theories. I mean, he was open to the idea that there were flying saucers. He was open to the idea that life on Earth had been started by extraterrestrials who had somehow pods, He was just open to almost any theory out there. Initially he believed in possession by demons and devils. At the end of his life, he had concluded that it wasn't devils or demons, but that it was the spirits of bad people who had died, So, he was never really set on, oh, yes, this is what happened or this is how it is. He was just always considering and open to the ideas, which I guess maybe is a good way to be, but I'm not as open, unfortunately.
Okay. Yeah, we gotta have a conversation on that one. Lisa will chalk it up to aliens. Everything that happens, it's like, oh, it's just aliens. Don't worry about it. Yeah. So, okay, this is our last initial question that was taken a month ago. And it's pretty much the same thing we covered in the whole video. It's from Daniel Stone 5196. What did you think of Exorcist Believer?
Well, we talked about it.
Yep.
I was expecting, sometimes you go in with preconceptions and they can color, right? Your
Hmm.
opinion of something. That's a film that from the start, from what I heard about it, who was making it, what the storyline was, what they meant to do with it, who was producing it, all of it set up red flags to me. I thought, this is going to be bad. This is a bad idea. I was never opposed, nor was my dad, to the idea of a sequel or prequel to The Exorcist. I would just hope that it would be well done, intelligently done, and be a good film and not just something for a quick cash grab to rip off audiences who really like the Exorcist.
Right.
So I was expecting it to be bad, and the press previews were universally bad. And so when I went, I was expecting it to be terrible. And for about the first 40 minutes, I was kind of amazed. I was like, wow, this is a pretty good movie. It
Hmm.
drew me in. I thought the characters were interesting. The earthquake scene and so on all looked authentic. I was saying to myself, I'm going to have to, I'm going to have to apologize for all the bashing I've done on the movie before it came out. But I
Right.
was going to do that. I was going to say, you know what? I was totally wrong. But then it just starts to go downhill, and I won't go into all the reasons, but it was just, the acting I thought was very good. The whole script, the dialogue, the way they brought in Ellen Burstyn, the things they had her say, uh,
Yeah.
it was just terrible. The depiction of the religious people, I can't point to one specific thing. It was in the end what I thought it would be, an attempt to make a buck off the anniversary of The Exorcist. And I understand, the movie business is largely about making a profit, but I hate to see such good characters and such a good story put to such a poor, use. So I think when I rated it, I didn't think it was a total disaster. I on the
It
1
was
to
a
10,
four
I
out
gave
of
it
ten.
about a 6, maybe a 5.5. It had some good things, good acting, some good production values, but overall, I think a terrible film. And I can only
Right.
guess that the next two are going to be even worse.
Yeah, I don't know where you're going to take it from there.
So that's when every time, I actually went and saw the film a couple of times, and my son went to see it. And our experience in every case was that we were about the only people in the film. Did you hear the story about the guy who fell asleep in the theater?
Yeah, I did. I thought that was pretty interesting.
For
That
those who didn't, some guy went to see it after it had been out about a week. He was, I guess, the only guy in the theater, and he fell asleep, not surprisingly. And
they
the
left him there.
the people, the multiplex people didn't know anybody was in there. He probably had slumped over in the seat, and they locked up the theater. He woke up at like 4 a.m, right? Locked in the movie theater. And I thought that tells it all about this movie. Your one
Right.
patron falls asleep and gets locked in the theater.
Right.
That says it
So
all.
did you kind of add to the to your I remember you gave it a 4 out of 10, so you're probably thinking more
Oh,
of a five.
oh, well, see, it's been a while. I would go more with my initial judgment because I haven't seen it since then.
Okay.
So if I
Okay,
said
because I
4
know
out
I
of
went
10,
five out of 10, then
I'm
you
gonna
went
stick
four
to
out of
4 out
ten.
of 10. I'm
Was
gonna stick to
yeah.
4. The only reason I gave it above a 2 was because I thought, like, as I say, the first half hour, 40 minutes were
Yeah.
good. And
Yeah.
I would say the same thing about the Pope's Exorcist, which I saw out of morbid curiosity. I thought the first like half hour, 40 minutes were good. And then it just goes totally downhill.
Somebody had left a comment saying if you forget that it's supposed to be about Father Amort and treat it like a superhero film, then you'll be fine or something like that.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
But
I feel,
okay.
I shouldn't, but I feel bad for horror buffs and aficionados, and especially people who love The Exorcist, who faithfully go to all these exorcism movies
Right.
because they maybe largely because they love the original and the feeling that it gave them, and they're hoping for something. But I mean, it's like let the buyer beware. I mean, these people don't have to go see these movies, but it bugs me that I feel like they're being ripped off, that they deserve more for their money.
If say like we go back in time and Warner Brothers approached your dad about making a sequel, but instead he made a prequel. Do you think he'd be more prone to make a prequel to The Exorcist, kind of covering what he made up for Father Merrin?
You know,
Seemed like that would have been an
if they
easier
had gone
route.
to him and suggested a prequel,
Yeah.
I just, you know what, I'll say what I said before, which is basically that he felt that he had said everything he had to say
Right.
with those characters. And I don't think he had an interest in, I mean, of all of his films, he was never, not that they were that popular, but he never did a sequel or prequel to any of his films.
Right.
You know, he always had other ideas. You know, he wanted to write this after The Exorcist. He decided he wanted to write this book about his mother.
Right.
And he could have made a ton more money if he had done a sequel to The Exorcist. Instead, he wrote this book about his mom. Right. And it was only, you know, then people say, well, then why did he do Legion 10 years later? Well, because 10 years later, he had come up with this theory about what life kind of, you know, what life is about and what, you know, what the purpose of life is. And he sort of wanted to get that across to his audience. And he knew at that point that people were only going to read him if he resurrected the characters from The Exorcist, you know.
Right.
None of his other books really did very well, except Legion did fairly well. And so he used those characters just to get across this message. Otherwise, I don't think he ever would have gone back to those characters. So that's
right.
The answer. You know, he never would have done an Exorcist sequel or prequel.
So when he wrote Legion, would you say that's about the time that he figured that the possession of demons and whatnot was more so bad people?
No, that was actually even later that he came to that conclusion.
Okay.
But it might have been shortly thereafter. And I'm not sure why he did. Maybe he felt that God is powerful enough, and why would God allow maybe I think he thought he gave too much credence to the idea of a powerful evil being like Satan or Lucifer or whatnot. Yeah, I'm not sure, but even when he had this theory of evil, like the spirits of dead evil people, he wasn't like utterly convinced that that was the case. It was, again, his openness to the possibilities of things, you know.
Right. Horror and Coffee comes up. That was Where Evil Lurks came from Argentina, and I think it's a really good film.
Oh, okay.
For some reason I couldn't think Argentina, so thank you for that, for answering that. Yeah. I think we can go ahead and move on to any questions.
Hey, I think if you get a live person, they should get some kind of bonus or something, shouldn't they? Like,
you know, I thought about that, but I couldn't come up with anything like right off the bat. I was thinking if I can reach a certain amount of subscribers, I was going to do a giveaway. But we'll have to see how that goes. We do like tally, but I can't keep track of who my subscribers are and whatnot.
Of course, it doesn't have to be live, because I mean, if anybody wants to watch this later, that's fine. It's easier than trying to sit down.
Yeah, if I remember it, this will like save. I hope. Once it's over. But let's see,
whatever it might be worth.
So I'm going to give it to anyone who's watching. If you have any questions, please submit them now, so we can continue. I hate to not have any questions for Mike while we have him, because you know we're right up on Christmas, and he took some time to do this for me. And if anybody's got any questions to submit in the chat, appreciate that, because we pretty much went through all the initial questions. I know I've got a couple questions that I could probably ask, since I haven't seen anybody questions here yet. Can you share that story about the scene you were in with Ellen Burstyn, where you came up to her with the asking for an autograph?
Yeah,
I think that's a great story.
It is kind of funny, isn't it? Well, you know, as I mentioned, you know, they had that big crowd scene, and my dad wanted to give me a little part, you know. So I mean, he made me one of the extras, And he said, pick out any of your, because believe it or not, even though it looks like there's hundreds of people, there were a lot of people who tried to be in that scene and weren't able to. So you kind of had to audition for it. So my dad said, hey, if you want, you pick out 10 people you might know, and, they'll be in the movie, they'll be in the crowd scene. So we did that. And then my dad placed me near Ellen Burstyn so that I'd be on camera. However, it's like for 5 seconds, but he wanted to give me a bigger part. And so he wrote a part in the scene where Ellen Burstyn walks through Georgetown with the Tubular Bells music. He gave me a scene in which I would just be a student walking, actually with a friend of mine. We're walking down the street and we recognize her and we stop her and ask for an autograph. And I think the reason was not just to give me more of a part, but he wanted to establish that Ellen Burstyn was a recognizable actress, a famous actress where anybody would recognize her in the street. And then also he wanted to, it was setting up the scene with Kinderman when Kinderman asked for her autograph. So it was supposed to be like a precursor of that scene, I think, a subtle, intro. I don't know why, but that was so. Anyway, so we did it, and it took two days to film simply because Friedkin tended to squeeze it in at the end of the day. It wasn't like the most important scene to him, obviously.
Right.
We did it kind of late, and then what would happen is the light would start to get too dark, so we had to come back the next day and do it. Well, that was great for me because it was considered a speaking part. Right. So if you were in the crowd scene, you got like $25 for the day. Remember, this is 1972. But if you were speaking part, you got something like $100 for the day. So I got for 2 days, I got like $200, maybe it was $300. And that was a lot of money back then, to me. Anyway, so we did the scene and she comes and I say, oh, Chris McNeil, I'm a big fan of yours. Can I please have your autograph? And she says, oh, sure. And so I get something handed to her. And then I invite her to a Halloween party. It was all ad-lib. I say, hey, we're having a Halloween party tonight. And if you'd like to come, it'd be great to have you. And she says, oh, no, I don't have a costume. And I said, well, that's all right. You don't have to wear a costume. And then she says, oh, well, then I definitely don't want to come. And that was it. So the funny thing is that, of course, it got cut because Friedkin filmed like 5 hours of film and he had to cut all these extra bits that weren't essential. So, of course, I was disappointed because I wanted to have a bigger part. But years later, which is like maybe 10 years ago, I went to the screening at the Academy and Ellen Burstyn was there and William Friedkin. And the Academy people knew I was there just in the audience and they saw my name and they said, oh, you have to go backstage and you have to say hello to Friedkin and Ellen Burstyn, which I really didn't want to do. I was with some friends and, I didn't, but anyway, she insisted, no, you have to go back. So I went back and I saw Friedkin briefly and then Ellen Burstyn. And I said to her, this is the funny part. I said, Ms. Burstyn, I'm sure you won't remember me, but I'm, William Blatty's son. And you probably won't remember we had a scene, ad-lib scene in which I come up and ask for your autograph in the Tubular Bell scene. she looked at me with this blank expression. And so very politely, she said, oh no, I'm sorry. I don't remember that.
Oh, wow.
And so, of course, why would she remember that? But I was sort of crushed that she didn't remember. But the funny thing was, the look she gave me is I think she thought I was out of my mind, like it had never happened. And the thing is, I can't prove it now that it happened because there's no footage.
Right.
Unless that film turns out.
Maybe it's somewhere.
Someone doing research. There's absolutely nobody to verify that it happened.
Right.
Everyone's dead. And it's just fine.
I know it sucks.
Yeah. But it did happen. But anyway.
I think it would have been kind of awkward because if anybody really watched it and had seen you in the background and then see you coming up for an autograph.
Well, they wouldn't have noticed me in the background because there were too many people. No, there were too many people.
I see you, but then you've pointed it out. So that's one big thing.
Yeah. No, I don't think anybody would have. It wouldn't have mattered. But what I have thought is, well, how do they break up Tubular Bells? Do they suddenly put the music in the background, kind of like quietly, and then bring it up again.
That's what I was thinking of. Like have the music and then just kind of hear the conversation while the music's playing.
Anyway,
Yeah.
I do agree with Friedkin. There was no need for that. It didn't. It was.
I don't know. It would have been still cool to see. I would have probably kept it like in the version you never saw. That would have been awesome. I'm going to go on to this question here because we got a couple here from Dragonflix. Did your father ever watch the film Beyond the Door?
I don't think so. Look, I can't say for sure, but he had no interest in these sort of rip-offs or films that suggested by The Exorcist.
Mm-hmm.
He had no curiosity about it. He wasn't worried about was there grounds for a lawsuit or something like that. He had no interest. No.
Huh.
I mean, even they didn't ask this, but when they had that miniseries with on TV, the Exorcist, what was it called? The TV series.
Oh, the Fox TV.
The what?
The Fox TV series that they put out. Okay.
Well, I mean, you would have thought he would have been interested and at least curious about it. And I asked him when it had been out for 2 or 3 segments. I said, "Hey, Dad, did you see that? What did you think?" He said, "Oh, yeah, I saw the first one. I kind of fell asleep in it, but," he said, "I thought there was some good acting in it, but," and he never watched it again. He just,
right.
It's surprising to me. It's surprising to people that he didn't take more of an interest, but he just didn't. I remember, just a side note, once I was talking to the writer John Updike, and his book, The Witches of Eastwick, had recently produced on stage in London. And I asked him, I said, "Oh, by the way, have you been and seen the production of Witches of Eastwick in London?" And he said, "Oh no." He said, "I have no interest." He said, "As long as they send me the check."
Oh, there you go.
That was John Updike. So, So the answer is no. He wasn't interested.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's got another course. Oh, let's go to King Gore. He's next up. I'll share this out. Question: what type of music do you listen to, and do you have any favorite songs worth recommending?
Me?
Yes.
Well, okay. I have to say, I'm almost flattered that they would ask, because why would anybody care? I could see someone asking, what songs did my dad like to listen to? But I don't know why. I mean, I'm happy to answer, but I don't know why anyone's interested. But so songs, well, when I was in college, which is the year when I think when you listen to the music the most, I was really into folk music. And the man, in addition to the Beatles, whom I loved, I mean, so my number one group to listen to is the Beatles.
Right.
But after all these years, but I always, when I was in college, it was like Gordon Lightfoot, Peter, Paul and Mary, Simon and Garfunkel. Now,
what about the Doors? I know you went to go see
the
Jim
Doors.
Morrison.
I saw the Doors a couple of times in concert. Yeah, I loved the Doors. All that music at the time I loved. Now, the band I like a lot, but they don't play much really, is actually Crowded House. But again, it's more folk type music.
Right.
Crowded House. Yeah. I mean, so no, I kind of listen to the old stuff that I used to listen to. I'm not really up on
I still do too.
new music. I'm sure I'm missing a lot of great stuff. Yeah. That's
how about any recommendations of favorite songs? You got any favorite songs, or they pretty much
yeah, Crowded,
something you always come back to, maybe?
Well, I mean, like Crowded House, I like any number of their songs. Fall at Your Feet, Don't Dream It's Over. These are famous songs that have been out there for a while. There's a gal, a country singer named Mindy Smith that I saw a number of years ago when I was living in Boston. I don't listen to her much anymore, but she had some beautiful songs like, what are the titles now? Stay. One song is called Stay. Another is called Hurricane. So that's someone I would recommend, Mindy Smith. Yeah. So I'm sorry, I'm not really up on good music. Oh, of course I love, Bob Dylan and the Birds and, all those groups from the 60s. That was kind of my era when I was in high school. Yeah.
Oh, he went on saying, I make music, so I was just curious. Seems like a chill guy. I like oldies folks too. Thanks for answering.
Oh, well, thanks. I didn't
So
know that you were
that's
live.
awesome.
Yeah. Well, thanks for asking me. It's like,
Here, I'm going to move on this quick question. We'll
Yeah.
probably jump back here. Dragonflix, do you have a website or somewhere we could contact you? Now, when I did, I just reached out to you through Facebook.
Yeah. Well, you can certainly reach me through Facebook. I don't Twitter or tweet or any of that stuff, but I've had a Facebook page for many years, and in the last year, I always would post occasionally, almost regularly, stuff about my dad or about The Exorcist, just because I knew people were very interested in that, and I was, happy to like share what I know about my dad's work with people, So in this last year, knowing that the 50th was coming up, I've been posting a ton, reminiscences and things and pictures about The Exorcist. So once the anniversary is over, like the end of this month, I got way back because I've been doing it too much. But yeah, you could reach me at Facebook, and if you message me, I certainly answer questions, messages. Be happy to answer.
Yeah, he had to check me out before, to make sure I was a good guy and not some weirdo. I think I'm in the good guy section. So
who was that? That you, or is that the other guy saying?
No, that's me. When we were when I was contacting you, you had to check me out first because I was questionable.
Well, no, I don't do an in-depth. But what I do is I usually, as I think a lot of people do, just a quick check to see, okay,
oh yeah,
where are they coming from? Do I know any of the people they know? And just because you don't want to be people trying to sell you stuff or trying to sell you sex chats or whatever it is.
Oh God, I can't imagine.
It's like hi, I really
just start off. Hi, honey.
I was like, I
check out my pictures.
Yeah, right. No,
something like that. Okay, let's see. We'll move back down here. Hold on a second. Trying to figure it out. Okay, this one comes from, I think is it? Okay, yeah. Knife Girl. That's a nice name. Knife Girl.
Okay.
Hi, Michael. I love your dad in The Exorcist. How did he feel about Father Caris supposedly dying at the end of the original? And did he think it should have ended differently? Thank you.
Well, thank you. Nice girl. Nice girl.
I'll take knife.
I'll take
See the big knife.
How did my dad feel about Caris dying at the end of The Exorcist?
Mm-hmm.
Well, of course, it's in the novel, and my dad, of course, he wanted it to end that way because his whole point is he wanted resolution, in his novel. As you see the character agonizing about his faith and is there a God? And at the end, because he was a storyteller, he wanted a resolution and he wanted a happy ending. And to him, Caris's death is actually a happy ending because in the process of throwing himself out the window, he commits an act of self-sacrifice. It's not a suicide in my dad's mind. It's an act of self-sacrifice. He's giving his life to save basically a stranger because he doesn't really know her very well. And in those few seconds that he tosses himself out the window to save this little girl, he realizes that there is, in fact, a God. This is the way my dad explained it to me. Because in realizing that he will give his life selflessly for another person, he realizes that there must be a greater power than himself that does the same thing. And so in the act of saving this girl, he reclaims his faith in God. And so at the end, when Father Dyer is giving him the last rites, he's going to go to heaven. He's going to see God. He's going to live forever with God. That's what my dad's intention was. And so for my dad, it was a happy ending, eternity, with God. My dad, that's why my dad was always distressed when people thought that the devil won, and that the devil like threw Caris out the window. And
Right.
even Friedkin didn't really understand it, because I saw an interview with him after my dad's death, where in the film Leap of Faith, where Friedkin says, Blatty really screwed up the ending because Caris commits suicide at the end, and that's a mortal sin. So he's going to go to hell. Oh, there's my dog in the background. Sorry.
Hey, your pig can bark? How's that work?
Let's see if we get. Anyway, so that's it's, to me, it's hard to in reading the book and watching the film, it's hard for a viewer to understand that was my dad's thinking. I could see how there's how people could think it's there's we won't bring the pig out right now, but there's my wife Mary. Anyway, so you hate to see a guy die, but it's very dramatic. And again, my dad viewed it as a happy ending. And the reason he tagged on the original ending from the novel in the re-release of the film, where Kinderman encounters Dyer and they decide to go off and have lunch together and talk about movies, is my dad thought that was necessary for the audience to realize that it's a happy ending,
right,
not a downer. As you know, I've always preferred the original ending, when you just
just kind of walks away.
Yeah, it's left you, leaves you.
Yeah,
open.
Yeah, I always did too, but I never got the impression that it was the devil that threw him out the window or anything like that. I mean, you're watching the act, he's struggling, and he does it on his own.
Right.
So I don't understand anybody else misunderstanding
I've thought that, but surprisingly, maybe my dad found that a lot of people, maybe they weren't very sophisticated film goers, I don't know, thought that the devil won, and that really upset him, because he intended the film to be something to help people who were struggling with their faith. And he thought it would be uplifting to people. And so he was very distressed. And that's why he argued with Friedkin for years that they had to add some of the dialogue back into the film that he had cut.
Right.
They're on the steps discussing why does God allow this to happen.
Yeah, I could totally, I really prefer the theatrical version over having the scenes added back in. I mean, I like the scene where they're on the steps, and you've got Caris saying, "Why this girl?" That's fine, but like the addition of the spider walk, it just, for me, it kind of came too soon in a way.
Yeah. No, that a lot of people love that. They just love the imagery, and they love the head turning around and all that stuff. And to me, it's totally out of place. But I understand, the appeal, the visual appeal, and I understand the reasons why Friedkin did some of the stuff he did, but I don't agree with most of it. I think I told you when I met him after his autobiography came out, I went to a lecture they gave, and I talked with him after, and he asked me what I thought of the new version. I said, well, I wish you had never touched the original. He gave me this look like, what? I don't know whether it was like he was offended, he thought it was rude, or whether he was surprised and thought I would just automatically defend my dad.
I can hear him going, are you sure are you sure you're Bill's son?
Yeah, because I think he just presumed that I would be on my dad's side, but I wasn't. Yeah. And I was just being honest with him. No, I wish you had left it alone. So he seemed kind of startled by that, and maybe offended because I don't know. Okay. Maybe it seemed like an insult. But I'm not sure he didn't care in particular what I thought. He was surprised, that's all.
Right.
But I will always prefer the original by far. That ending with Dyer just looking out, it's just like the perfect ending, and standing there by the steps.
Right. This actually leads into the next question, though.
So, what's that?
Oh, this leads right back into the next question. It's funny. From Dragonflix, Michael, did you see the theatrical version of The Exorcist? Yeah. I understand the USA version was different than the UK version. Is that true? Wow.
I never saw it in the UK, so I don't know. I would be surprised if it was different. That's the first I've heard that. I'm not saying it's not so, but my understanding was the only thing that was censored was like the release of the video. I kind of forget about all that, because they had problems I thought it was not allowed on TV, and that maybe even the video was banned for a while. Do you remember what happened in Britain? I know it was censored, but I don't know to
Yeah,
what
and I
extent.
think wasn't it? I think it was released like in the 80s or something like that.
Yeah.
Dragonflix, do you got a answer for that as far as what if there was anything
No,
changed in the
he
UK
may know
version?
more than I do about this,
So he's probably
Ken,
he'll
Mark
probably
Kermode would know the answer.
Dragonflix. Yeah, I'm sure.
Kermode would definitely know the answer.
Yeah, we'll just call him up. I've got a free call here. Hold on. No, I'm
Yeah.
kidding.
Well, he has a website. I've never talked to him. I've never met him or talked to him directly.
Yeah.
Nobody knows more about The Exorcist. Well, let me say this: the making of the film and the details than Mark Kermode. Nobody knows more about my dad and what my dad's intentions were and about what went into the making of the book than I did.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I
You know,
know a
that's
lot more about the
that
making of the book than I know about the making of the film.
right.
Yeah.
So how was he alone in that cabin? I mean, I've known you
Well,
said
no,
a
you
few
know that.
things
Yeah. Well,
that it's like two cabins, but then was he
yeah.
or did he actually have family show up at all or anything
Well,
like that?
here's
Or did he
here's
bring
yeah,
work
that's an
home?
interesting question. He started in Lake Tahoe,
Mm-hmm.
Incline Village, and I was never there. He was married to a second wife at the time, and actually my sister, Mary Jo, who was the basis for the character of Reagan before she becomes possessed. My sister was never
Oh,
possessed.
Mary Jo was?
Yeah, my
Oh,
younger
that's
sister was the
interesting.
basis on.
I always thought your dad just took Mary Jo's name and then just kind of added her in as the Mary Jo Perrin.
No, I'm talking about the character of Reagan was based on my younger sister, Mary Jo.
Okay.
But
Okay.
Mary Jo Perrin, the name Mary Jo, was definitely based on my sister. But the
Right.
character of Reagan as a young girl before she becomes possessed is 100% my sister, Mary
Oh,
Jo.
that's interesting.
My dad
Yeah.
even says that, in effect, in his book From Novel to Film.
Yeah, I'll have to look that
Anyway,
back up.
so when my dad started the book, I was at Cape Kennedy watching the liftoff of Apollo 11. I was doing a cross-country trip with a friend. I was 17.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad was in Incline Village in Lake Tahoe, and he spent a couple of months, and he said many times he only managed to write about 2 paragraphs there, the first couple of pages.
Right.
And he just couldn't work there. Part of the problem was there were casinos all over, and I think he, for a brief time, was like a gambling fanatic, and
Uh-oh.
he was running off. And in fact, I guess he won a lot of money, and his wife at the time would soak the money and freeze it and put it in the freezer so he couldn't go out and use it. It's like I got these stories from my sister who was visiting at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So he was there only a couple of months, and he finally realized he wasn't going to be able to do any work there, with
Right.
all these casinos around. So that's when he rented this cabin, which is, my parents had been divorced several years previously. My dad had remarried this woman named Beth,
Mm-hmm.
who was with him in Lake Tahoe. And then they split up. And then my dad rented this cabin up in the hills of Encino, close to where our family home was. So it was an hour, and it was a mile and a half from where our family was living.
Was that owned by? I forgot how
It was
Angela
owned by
Lansbury.
my dad told me it was owned by why is her name coming out of my head?
Is it Angela Lansbury?
Angela Lansbury.
Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm.
So he rented this cabin from her. I never saw her. I don't know if she was living in the main house at the time or not. All I know is he rented the cabin from her. So that's where he did all of his writing, and he was living. He was, to answer your question, he was living alone there because he and his second wife were separated at the time, weren't getting along.
Okay.
So he was living alone, and it had a bedroom and a little bathroom. It was quite small, but it had a living room that he used to write in. And I would walk up when I got back from, because I had gotten back from my cross country trip, and I was always interested in my dad's writing and his work. And he had given me the preface, the Iraqi sequence, and he told me what he was working on. So I would walk up. It was in the summer mostly. I would walk up. It was only a mile and a half, and I was a kid. I was like 17. And I would go and sit with him in the evening. He would usually start 8 or 9 at night and work right through until like 8 the next morning. I wouldn't stay the whole time, but that's when he wrote. And I would come and sit with him and sit by the typewriter and actually be reading the pages as they came off the typewriter. So
Hmm.
it was fun for me and kind of exciting. And because I thought it was a great story. I was the first person to read it. I've told people, I was, because, that's the only person who was there, and he was working constantly because he was pretty much broke, interest in his scripts and
Right.
and then he had my family, my mom and my sisters and me to support in a kind of a big house. And he was renting this guest house, and he probably had financial responsibilities to his second wife that he was separated from. So he was broken. He got a $10,000 advance to write this book. So he was really under the gun and under pressure.
Oh, okay. Here,
Oh,
hold on a second.
yeah.
He did respond here. Dragonflex says, I'm talking about the stage version of the film.
Oh, the stage version. I'm so
Yeah,
sorry.
so the stage. Okay.
I'm so
Mhm.
sorry. I don't know how I missed that detail.
No, I missed it too.
Yeah.
So,
So and the
oh, I
question
see
was,
what he meant. I see what he meant
so
on
what was the
theatrical
question then
version.
again? Say.
Yeah, okay. Originally, so I'm going to guess
Mhm.
that when he said theatrical version of The Exorcist, he meant like on stage.
Okay. And what was the question regarding that?
Did you see it? Did you see the theatrical version, the one that the
No,
stage presentation of The Exorcist?
no.
And
And
he says, I understand the US version was different from the UK version.
oh, I
So
see.
that's what he
Oh,
meant.
there. Okay.
Okay.
Now the
Is
question
that right,
to me.
Dragonflex? Is that what you meant?
Yes. Now that makes sense to me. Yes. Oh, no. Did he see either, by the way, this person who's asking?
Oh, did Dragonflix, did you see both of them or either one of them? He probably, Dragonflix probably has. I'm not familiar with the channel.
Okay. So to answer the question, I never saw it. I always meant to see. I was living in Boston at the time, and I did periodically go back to LA, but it wasn't a good time. I was talking to my dad a lot about it, and was curious to know, what he thought, because this the playwright who wrote Agnes of God was
Mm-hmm.
wrote the play, which I thought was promising.
Hmm.
And of course, as you know, Richard Chamberlain and Brooke Shields, I think,
Right.
starred in it. So it sounded like kind of very promising. But when I asked my dad about it, he said, "Oh well," he thought that there were some good things in the play, but he didn't think it was particularly good. So it wasn't his idea, I don't think, to make a play of it. I think there was other producer had approached him and said, I've got this writer and is interested, and so my dad thought, well, okay, this might be good, and so he helped. He was behind it and met with the playwright and so on. So anyway, I didn't see the play. I think it got sort of decent reviews. It had a very short run, I think maybe 2 or 3 weeks at the Geffen Theater, I think, in Westwood. And then the guy who was behind it wanted to bring it to Broadway. He was going to make it a full Broadway show.
Mm-hmm.
I won't go into the details, but he got in all kinds of problems, and was almost jailed, this producer. And then that fell through. And then they tried to kind of do a run in England, thinking that maybe it would do well there. That's when there were changes made, I understand. The playwright came back and made changes because the reviews hadn't been great in LA. I don't know what they added, but basically people went to see it because they had Penn and Teller, they had the special effects, and they had the voice of who's the actor who plays Gandalf in Lord of the Rings.
Oh,
Great Shakespearean actor. I can't think of his name.
yeah, I can see his face though.
And I've
Yeah.
seen him on stage. But anyway,
Mm-hmm.
he did the voice of the demon. And so it was kind of sold as like, I think it came out around Halloween, and it was kind of sold as a spooky production. And I always thought it was a bad idea myself. I couldn't see a good stage production of it because people have seen the movie. They expect special effects.
Sure.
And they're going to be disappointed. You already know the story, the dialogue. I didn't see the point in a play of it. I still don't. I've seen a spoof. I've seen what do you call it? A production by transvestites or something, which was very funny. I saw a show
That's got me
called
curious.
it was called the Exorcist.
Oh,
And I went to see it because the Boston Globe said, "Hey, this is good. Go see it." I went to see it
Right.
out of curiosity. I thought it was very funny to the
Mhm.
extent that I asked them if I could have a tape of it to show my dad because I thought
Yeah.
he would find, he had a good sense of humor. I thought he'd get
Right.
out of it. He was not the slightest bit amused by it. I
Huh.
think he didn't like it at all.
Do you know if this is available on video or no or?
I probably not, but we can get back together. I have a copy of it somewhere on VHS or something.
Huh.
I might be able to get
Okay.
it to you. Now, there's some show running somewhere of a similar production by some other group. I don't know who's doing it. I don't know what rights they have, but there is some sort of musical production. You see, I could see a
Right.
successful spoof done as a musical, in the way that they did the thing about the Mormon church and you know what I mean? This kind of stuff.
Right.
I could see a successful spoof done
I,
in drag of it or something, but, um, you know, I can't see the value in if someone is still trying to make a play of it and bring it off Broadway and Broadway, I don't see the point.
here's Dragonflix responded. In the UK, Ian McKellen played the
Oh,
voice
yeah,
of the
Ian McKellen.
devil.
He played the
Yeah.
voice, they recorded, his voice,
Mhm.
and that was the big selling point, Ian McKellen, because he's such a great actor and well-known. Um, yeah, it had a run. It ran in England twice, and it came back, and it was 2 or 3 months going all over the country in the provinces, so-called, up to Manchester, and I think it was even in Ireland. There was a play production of it in Italy, in Rome, and I think
Right.
various places. And I think my dad or his estate get little tiny residual checks. They had to pay something, but not much. But it has not caught on that I know of anywhere.
Hmm. Here, I got another question here. I don't want to skip him here. He
Yeah.
was kind of rephrasing his question.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I
I'm
didn't.
probably going to slaughter your name.
What's that?
I'm going to probably slaughter the viewer's name in Quadra. Is that how you pronounce it? In Quadra Mexa. If I got it wrong, sorry.
I
Forgive
don't know
me on
whose
that.
name
I'm
this
not good with names.
Whose
So
name?
his question is:
Mhm.
there was a suggested alternate ending where Father Dyer meets a jogger, and then the stranger's voice turns into Caris. Did
Yes.
Blatty talk more about this suggested ending? I think I read that in like Cemetery magazine. In
Mhm.
the epilogue, there's a couple like that where he's given alternate endings.
Yes. Well,
Mhm.
my dad, again, as this goes back to the point that he was distressed that he thought too many people thought the devil won. And when there was the opportunity to recut the movie and re-release it,
Mhm.
which Friedkin took up, and that was the cut I think that was called the so-called director's cut,
Yeah.
which, as I've always said, is ridiculous because it wasn't the director's cut; it was really the writer's cut, because it was incorporating the cuts that my dad wanted replaced.
Right.
But it was director's cut in that Friedkin is the one who put it back together.
I think they were calling it also extended cut.
Yeah, I there've
Something like
been
that.
so many
Yeah.
just different all attempts to sell more DVDs, right? But they do have the so at that point when my dad realized there was going to be an opportunity to maybe tamper with it a little, or then he came up with that idea of that ending because he thought that would make it clear that that it was a happy ending and that Karis lives forever. Now, I
Right.
have to say, when I read that, I just thought it was a terrible idea, just a terrible idea, and I'm glad he didn't do it. See, here's the thing that I just don't think you can make a movie and convince people who are doubting God's existence that God exists because something happens in a movie that might.
Right.
And my
Right.
dad always felt that I think he always felt that he could use his movies to convince people that God exists and that there is an afterlife, you know? And I just don't think you can do that because it's not real life. It's just a movie. Like at the
Right.
end of the ninth configuration, um, Cutshaw finds a medal, right? That used to be around Killer Kane's neck.
Mm-hmm.
And he looks at the medal and he goes, "Where did this medal come from?" And then he has this huge smile on his face because it convinced
Oh,
him
yeah. Mm-hmm.
that Kane is still alive and that there is an afterlife.
Yeah.
That's the end of the movie. And I think my dad thought that that scene would be uplifting to people and would make them believe. And I just don't think movies influence people that way. I think it was very naive of him. Anyway, that's just what I think. I mean, he was always, he at one point he wanted to be a priest when he was in college.
Right. Right.
And he always had that sort of priestly desire to comfort people and to convince them that there is a God, that was
Mm-hmm.
always in him. He described the movie many times as an apostolic work, the book in the movie. And yeah, he also needed to make money and he was a writer.
Right.
So, it wasn't just a work of charity, but he got mocked, I know, when the film made millions of dollars. And in an interview, he said, well, he meant it as an apostolic work. And
Mm-hmm.
some critics mocked him and said, yeah, an apostolic work that made you like, $200 million. But I know that he was sincere.
Mm-hmm.
He always was trying to, like a priest, wanted to help people believe because he, through his life, struggled with belief. And in the end, did believe, but it was a real struggle for him. And I think he suffered as a result of his doubts, because of loved
Right.
ones who died, his mother, and it tormented him to think that that was maybe the end and that he would
Right.
never see them again. So he struggled with the belief. And having done that, he wanted to comfort people in a way that maybe nobody had been able to comfort him, So
Right.
it was a good, but I think it's naive, but his
Right.
intentions were good,
Right. Do you feel like after he wrote The Exorcist that he was more inclined? Well, obviously he wrote the one about his mother, but it just seemed kind of like he had to somehow
To do what?
to write that the other than a sequel, he wrote about his mother. That it inspired him to write more so about his mother after he wrote The Exorcist.
Well, I think what happened was, he had written his first book, which was called Which Way to Mecca, Jack, all about his early life in Beirut and his childhood and, our early family life, really good book, one of my dad's
advertising.
but that had come out in 1960 and it had done well. It had done well in Los Angeles, local bestseller. But other than that, it wasn't very well known. So I think once he had, for the first time, fame and money as a result of The Exorcist, I think he saw it as an opportunity to like dust off some of that material, and get it into more people, more readers' hands. And also, his mother had passed away in the meantime, and he wanted to do a kind of tribute to her.
Right.
But a lot of the stories in I'll Tell Them I Remember You are stories that he tells in Which Way to Mecca, Jack. But then he updates it. As you know, and I've told you, my dad was basically a humorist. He wrote funny stuff.
Right.
Screenplays and books, and it was really Killer Kane was the first sort of serious book that he wrote, and he wrote it largely because of the death of his mother and his loss of faith, and that's when it all started. All the themes that you see in The Exorcist really are set forth in Twinkle Twinkle Killer Kane, which came out about 5 years before The Exorcist.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Which is why I always direct people who really are interested in those questions to go back and read not Ninth Configuration, which was like a rewrite of Killer Kane, but to go back and read Twinkle Twinkle Killer Kane.
Right. Which one do you prefer between the two?
Well, Killer Kane is my favorite of my dad's books.
Right.
for kind of personal reasons. Um, uh, and I think it's my dad's. He always told me it was his favorite of his books. I'm not saying it's his best book, because probably best in terms of writing is probably The Exorcist. But it's just, I don't know, personal reasons, things my dad was going through at the time, my parents' divorce, you know, just emotional things that my dad was going through, and that like our family's going through at the time. They're touched upon in Killer Kane. And I knew my dad was like living alone at that time and depressed and writing on his own. And so it was just
right.
Yeah.
So
So
he
it
had
always
a
had a
lot
special
to
place.
reflect on.
Yeah. It always, I always feel closest to my dad when I read Killer Kane.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I just purchased that not too long ago.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead and he continues on. I've always thought that Blatty rescued this idea, but in a twisted way with Exorcist 3.
Mhm.
Instead of a Christ-like apparition, it turned into a demonic duality with Caris, Gemini, and Pazuzu.
Let me, yeah, there's a lot of thought in there. I have to, okay, that he turned what into a twisted way? Oh, it's like a trinity, like a sort of evil trinity, as opposed to Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Is that sort of what he's saying?
It might be the whole message of faith, I'm guessing, maybe, because we've been talking about how that ending.
I can't say for sure. I doubt that my dad sort of planned that deliberately, maybe
Right.
subconsciously, but it's an interesting observation. I think it's a good observation. Someone pointed out to me, and I thought it was another good observation, was like, it was belief in demons that sort of helped my dad believe in God. And somebody said to me, it's kind of strange and like kind of ironic that it was the belief in possession that that your dad is using to promote belief in God.
Yeah, you've stated that a few times. If there are devils, then there is God and there are angels.
That was his that was his argument, that it was almost easier to believe in devils than it is to believe in angels, I think. If you look at some of the horrible stuff that goes on in the world, it's almost easier to believe in devils than angels. But if you do believe in the devils, then you pretty much...
Well, you can't have one without the other.
Well, I mean, although when you think of it, you could.
duality.
I mean, why can't you? Why can't you have a sadistic God? I mean, I don't think there is, but I mean, who are we to say? Maybe there are devils and an evil God and there are no angels. I don't think so, but anything's possible, I suppose.
Yeah.
That was my dad's logic. That was my dad's logic, his reasoning.
Right.
But again, you can say, it's like the St. Augustine's proofs of God, so-called proofs of God's existence. There are no proofs. There are like arguments to be made, logical arguments, but you can't prove any of this. My dad was always trying to prove. He was always looking for proofs, like the recordings of the dead on tape.
Right.
Well, this is proof, No, it's not.
Here we got King Gore back. He says, I feel like The Exorcist would work as a dinner theater show. LOL. A more personal setting would be cool.
Well, I mean, some of these, I mean, I don't think my dad would have objected to any of this stuff. He probably wouldn't have gone to see them. But I think,
the vomit scenes, I don't know how to deal with that while I'm eating.
Theater. I mean, I think if you could do a dinner theater, do a thing where you actually go into the bedroom and hang out with Reagan and, and eat pea soup or whatever people want to do, there's a campy aspect to the whole thing, which it didn't begin as camp, but it could certainly be camped up and has been. And all the Saturday Night Live spoofs on it, or at least the two that are just fabulous. Anyone who's interested in The Exorcist hasn't seen the first Saturday Night Live spoof from like the 1970s. I can't even remember the actors who were in it.
Lorraine Newman and Richard Pryor, and
I
think the guy who was playing the Exorcist, or the main priest, wasn't he the same one that played in the blaxploitation film?
Oh, I don't know.
Abby. I
I
kind of
don't
thought
know.
it was.
I wouldn't be surprised, but I mean, that's hysterically funny. And my dad got a big kick out of that too. You know, your mama so sucks, that smell. You know,
Then you got Lorraine Newman. When she goes into that like trying to play a child, she always sounds like Shirley Temple or something.
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
Father, can I have some soup? I'm
that
so
slaps him
hungry.
across the
That
face.
kind of thing. Yep.
Throws up in his face. Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, I think there are all kinds of possibilities. Again, I think a good musical could be done of it. Probably will be one day. I don't think a really good stage play can ever be done, just because the kind of audience that would wants to see it has seen the movie and is expecting special effects.
Well,
you know,
did you ever listen to the BBC radio presentation of The Exorcist?
I haven't. I've had it for years, but I haven't listened to it. There's so much I haven't listened to.
Some people don't enjoy it. I do, because like you can hear the atmosphere like when they're walking. But I think they just start off with the investigation. They don't really cover the entire book.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but it's got its take. It's enjoyable in ways. Let me get to this one here, and I think we kind of covered this question before. I just want to make sure we got this here.
By the way, this is
again from
cap. By the way, this is the Bulldogs, the Hoya Bulldogs. This is my
awesome
Georgetown cap. That's where I'm wearing.
Oh, gotcha.
Bulldog, Jack.
Yep.
Okay. Anyway, one tie into Georgetown, and
Dragonflix again. Michael, did you follow your dad in the entertainment business?
No. As I think I kind of answered that question. A number of years ago, I wrote a screenplay, probably when I was in my mid-20s, but it wasn't a horror book story. It was about the poet Percy Bysshe Shelley and his death. And I might dust it off one day, because I still think it was a really good idea. But I wrote a screenplay, and my dad didn't think it was a good idea. He said, it's a costume drama. Number one, it would be a costume drama, so it'd be very expensive to film, set in the 1820s and set in Italy, and, about the English romantic poets. He said, nobody's going to be interested. But I did show it. He did let me show it to a reader somewhere who said, no, I put it aside and never did it again. But I've still got it somewhere. I might dust it off.
So if you,
I told you I avoided, because I had all kinds of opportunities. But number one, I had no particular interest in being a filmmaker, other than maybe writing a screenplay or two.
Right.
And I didn't want to be kind of known as, there's Blatty's kid.
They just tell it.
I shied away.
Blatty's kid.
Yeah. But there's good money to be made in films. There have been times when I thought, well, maybe that was not a good decision not to follow, done something in the business.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see what we got real quick. This is from Richard B. How awful to receive confirmation of God's existence to be confronted by his enemies. I wonder how in all of the Exorcist films that not an angel ever appeared. I think it's more of a statement than a question.
Yeah. So in all the Exorcist films, you mean the two that my dad did, or all of them, an angel never appears?
I think it's just more of an observation.
Yeah, I know. Because I'm trying to think if I can think of a time in which
outside maybe the dream that Kinderman had, maybe.
Good point.
That's the only time I can think of.
Only the dream in Legion, where they're in heaven. And you have the angel of death, who is Patrick Ewing, basketball player. So there is that one angel who does appear, but it's a good point. Actually, it's a good point. It's a good observation. I'm sorry my dad isn't around to answer that, because I don't think that. I think that's the only time you see a benevolent spirit, appearing, because after all, here's this child possessed by a demon. So where are the angels?
Right.
So yeah, it's a good observation.
King Gore comes back on the dinner theater idea.
I think he wants to do one.
I think he wants to do one.
Yeah. I don't have the rights.
Don't
ask me. I don't have the rights.
We can hand out ponchos to the audience to block the pukes. Ew. Aim for the plate. My thought was, what's that smell? Is it Reagan or is it coming from the kitchen?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah.
Nasty.
I'll go see it when they put it on, maybe, when he puts it on, I'll go see it.
So do we have any other questions from anyone else? I've pretty much run out of questions on here. Oh, he does say, I do want to make my own version, I guess. So,
okay. All right. Well, good luck with that. You never know,
Yeah, definitely.
But
I did have a question, and I can't think of it now.
Yeah.
Wow, I had it in the back of my head too.
I'm trying to think.
When it comes
I'm
to
trying to
one.
think if I were watching this, what question I would ask.
I think I would have a question. If you could go back, say, I don't know, 80s, 90s, would you think maybe you would put out some screenplays? Did you have anything in mind?
If I could go what?
Say back like 80, 90, something like that, when there was a lot more tolerance in what was going on, in Hollywood. Do you think you would put out some screenplays?
Maybe.
Did you have any screenplays that you thought of putting out, or
a
different topic?
Well, no, the only, because the only film that as I say, I thought of doing was this book. It was called Dark Providence, was its title, and it was about the last years of Shelley, Percy Bysshe Shelley, whose wife, Mary Shelley, wrote Frankenstein.
Right.
And it was there were some supernatural aspects to it, because Shelley, toward the end of his life, and he was killed in a boating accident at the age of 29. He had some sort of visions, or thought he saw like doppelganger, images of himself, and that seemed to be premonitions of his death. And so there were like these sort of supernatural aspects that I thought would have made it very commercially viable.
Yeah, that would have.
But so I may one day dust that off. But since then, I remember the time my dad said nobody wants to see a movie about the English romantic poets set in Italy in the 1820s, and so I sort of. Plus, it probably
I think it would probably be a good film.
But what happened was, years later, Ken Russell came out with a film Gothic about that very same period of time that my screenplay was about, and I had written mine 10 years earlier. Right. And there was a movie that came out starring Hugh Grant called Rowing with the Wind.
Right.
And there've been one or two other films, feature films, that came out. But you know what the truth is? They didn't do well at the box office. So maybe my dad was right, even though Gothic was directed by Ken Russell. Who was a big filmmaker.
Right.
But I have other screenplays in mind that I may get to yet, but they're nothing to do with the supernatural,
Right. Right. And I know we discussed this before, the idea of you were talking about writing a book.
Well, I've written it.
Okay.
People are going to think that this is a plug that we set up.
Oh, that's fine.
What happened was, for many years, while my dad was alive, I thought, I was the first person to read the book. I was with my dad when he wrote it. I was there during the filming. The movie seems. I thought I should write a book about my experiences, my insights into the book and the filming, right. And, not just to make a buck, because I may be happy to make a buck, but it was more like, I was a witness to these things, and when I die, those memories are going to be gone, basically, and they might be of interest to someone. So for years I thought about doing it, and then 3 years ago, knowing that this anniversary was coming up, 50. I thought, this might be, if I'm ever going to do it, this might be the time, because there'll be more interest in The Exorcist than there has been in many years. So 3 years ago, I wrote the book, and in longhand, because I don't write quickly, and I didn't type it up. And I'm just a procrastinator. I was meant to type it up and get it to an agent and try to sell it and have it come out around now. And I just never did it. So it still sits in the other room in longhand. about 300 pages. And in the meantime, several books have come out in the last few months about
Right.
it.
Yeah.
So I kind of missed my opportunity, but that's the next on my agenda because it's already written. And whether there's interest or not, I think there will be. I'm going to get it typed up and get it to an agent. I'm not going to self-publish. I don't believe in that. I'm only going to have it published if a real publisher thinks, it's commercially viable. Otherwise, I'll just take it and give it to the Georgetown Library for researchers who might want to
Right.
write some more about my dad's life one day as kind of background material. But so that's the answer to your question. Thank you for the little plug.
Well,
But
I'm interested in it. Hopefully, you're able to get
it's
that
going to deal. It's going to
published.
deal very little with the filming. It's going to be almost entirely about the making of the book and what went into it and how
Right.
my family's life is reflected, which it
Still,
is.
it's kind of like looking outside the box on circumstances, because like it does kind of reflect on the books, on the book itself, because it's like when your dad mentioned continuing the exorcism after Marin died, it would have been a lot longer. And then I forgot who told him, you don't want to do that to your readers. And then so in a few days he was able to end it, and it was almost like that whole situation where the demon couldn't return to the body. There was like, how did I call it? No return clause or something like that.
Oh yeah.
And so it was kind of like Caris's way to get the demon out and out of the whole the house, by throwing himself out the window. I don't even know if he considered putting that in until way later.
Yeah. Well,
but it was like a quick ending
Mhm.
in that sense, instead of continuing the story where it could have lasted for months.
Well, see, it's interesting because with my dad's previous books, which were almost all comedies, he
Mm-hmm.
really didn't plot them out. I don't think he was kind of. Oh, there's a dog again. Sorry.
That's fine.
Kind of spontaneous. He was very imaginative and he was used to
Mm-hmm.
writing funny stuff. And I think he would just kind of sit down and just whatever came into his head
Right.
would riff on things. And with The Exorcist, though, he knew he had to have an outline, a story. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember he had this big bulletin board he never had before when he wrote, which was little index cards. I have one or two of them
Oh, wow.
pinned to the bulletin board, plot notes, reminding himself of character details and things. And he kept it right behind his typewriter to like reference. So he had a general plot and outline of characters, but he talks about somewhere where sometimes his imagination just took over and he was actually surprised. He talks somewhere, he says, oh my gosh, Dennings is going to die.
Right.
And it suddenly occurred to him.
Yeah. I
Like
think
the
that's like the
story
only
was
time that he had
moving,
that
and
happen.
he always ascribed it to his subconscious and unconscious that they were constantly working, especially late at night, which is why he liked to work
Right.
late at night, because he felt he had more access to
Right.
the elements of his brain. So there were, I'm not sure at what point he decided, but I know he had a basic outline, but a lot of stuff just came into his head as it went along. And he was under a lot of pressure to deliver the book on time.
Right.
I mean, your average writer, my understanding is probably works 4 or 5 hours a day because it's very intense.
I think he was doing 12, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was doing 12, 14 like daily for months.
Right.
And so, yeah.
When it was all over, was he pretty frazzled?
Well, I mean, it was just, he must have been exhausted, but he also was it was a great sense of relief to be done.
Yeah.
Again, he said various things, but he was never convinced that he'd be able to pull it off, a serious novel. You see all the, of course, the humor. He couldn't resist putting all the humor in there. Sometimes people watch the movie and they go, what are these? Is this supposed to be funny? Like, why is there humor in here? Like, this is a serious movie. Why are they making jokes like Kinderman and, all that banter? But that was my dad. That was his essential interest and style, humorous writing. That's what came naturally to him. Everything else was a real effort. He really had to work hard at the serious stuff. The funny stuff just came to him.
Here, I'm going to cover this real quick. Dragonflix also asks, I also understand that Stanley Kubrick was offered to direct the film. We kind of covered that already, though.
I think so.
How different do you think it would be? Yeah, we covered that earlier.
Yeah, and I don't know, I've heard stories that Stephen King was very unhappy with the Kubrick and the changes he made to his story.
Sure.
And I understand that as a writer, but I mean, it's hard to argue with how good that film is. But, I actually haven't read The Shining, so I don't know what the differences are. But
there's quite a bit.
My dad had the advantage with The Exorcist that he was the producer too. So he didn't have final say over everything. Obviously, with the editing, he didn't, but he had a lot of say, which writers rarely have. Imagine how rare that is. Most screenwriters, they write that, they turn it in, it gets rewritten 100 times. And it's got to be a hard life to be your average screenwriter. Is like all your material gets you feel like it gets destroyed probably. And there was my dad with the opportunity as a screenwriter to be in charge. It's so rare. He was so lucky. It was only because of the success of the book that he had that opportunity.
Here, I'm going to jump back. He had Dragonflix had a question.
Wait a minute. Who is this guy?
He's full of questions.
Why doesn't he just come in and, sit there with you?
We could pull that off. I'll have to set it up. I don't know if react quick enough, but maybe next time.
I think he's actually.
If we got another next time with Mike Blatty. Maybe we can start pulling some people in. I wasn't totally prepared for that. This is my first time doing a live, so next time maybe we can pull some people in who want to come in. We could probably set it up like that. Did your father ever talk about working on the Peter Sellers films?
Yeah, he told me stories about it.
Probably like Shot in the Dark.
Yeah, well, again, he was a screenwriter, so he wasn't there on set a lot that I'm aware of. But I think I told you the story, or maybe I haven't. By the way, my battery I think is running low, and I can't.
Okay.
So if I suddenly disappear,
no, we're probably gonna wrap this up.
Invite everyone
another time.
But what happened was when Blake Edwards asked my dad to work on the screenplay,
right?
He suggested that my dad meet with Peter Sellers because he didn't know him, and that they go on a ship together, the Queen Mary, from Long Beach. No, it wasn't the Queen Mary. No, because it was the Queen Mary, but it wasn't in Long Beach yet. It was in New York, and they went on a cruise together. He got them tickets to go together for like a week, whatever it took, to go over to England on the Queen Mary. Mm-hmm. So at the end, Peter Sellers worked on the story together on the ship. And my dad tells me a funny story is that when they got to London, they were staying at I don't know, one of the nice hotels. I can't remember which one. The Dorchester or something, of course, in different rooms. And Peter Sellers had a girlfriend at the time he was staying with. My dad was just alone. And I guess Sellers would call my dad in the middle of the night, regularly ring him up, 2, 3 in the morning with just ideas and questions. And my dad tells me one night, Peter Sellers calls and says, Bill, you gotta listen to this story. She said, I just told my girlfriend this story and she doesn't think it's funny. And I think it's hysterical. So let me tell you the story and you tell me. And so he told my dad the story. I'm sorry, I don't know what the story was. Mm-hmm. My dad said to him, no, it's not funny.
Click.
And then he hung up. And then 5 minutes later, Peter Sellers calls back and says, Bill, baby. And my dad just hung up on him. And it was crazy stuff like that. Mm-hmm. They both believed in, they were both alike in that they were both very, very attached to their mothers, mm-hmm. And they both believed in ghosts and spirits and things. And of course, they both had like crazy, wicked senses of humor. So I never met Sellers myself, but I mean, apparently the two of them were really compatible, had a lot of similar characteristics and got along really well. But I can't tell you it now, but there's sometime I'll tell you a story about a shot in the dark and a scene that was cut that my dad wrote
Mm-hmm.
Maybe would have been the funniest scene in the thing, but for puritanical reasons, it got cut. It couldn't be used. I'll
Huh.
tell you privately, and then we can decide if we can tell a story because it's pretty funny.
Huh. That's pretty
That's a little
interesting.
teaser. Yeah.
Huh.
But
Yeah, I kind of thinking about Shot in the Dark reminds me of that video I did, and the whole question I asked you about knowing Elkie Summers and how it was kind of incorporated in the novel that Chris McNeil's remembering someone who owned a house that was
oh yeah,
supposedly had poltergeists in it.
right.
So it's like the first thing I thought of was, wait a minute, that sounds like Elkie Summers. So that's where I came up with that whole idea.
Yeah.
And it seems like a lot of the characters in his work, especially Exorcist, were like he was used someone as the model.
Yeah.
Like when you said Mary Jo being like a model for Reagan.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And of course,
So,
my dad has discussed, that Chris McNeil was largely Shirley MacLaine,
right.
who had become a friend of my dad's during the filming of his comedy, John Goldfarb, Please Come Home. And
Right.
then I think I told you that, Shirley MacLaine's brother is Warren Beatty. And after my parents divorced, my dad and Warren Beatty were roommates for a while.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I can tell you some funny stories about that. Actually, my dad didn't tell me, but some of his buddies told me at his wake. That my dad had told them about his adventures with Warren Beatty. That pretty
Probably could say that for the book, eh?
pretty good story. No,
that?
it's not. They're not in the book, but
Oh,
they're pretty.
that
I
would have
mean,
been
I
interesting,
can
though.
understand why my dad didn't tell them to me, but they're pretty good stories. So.
Oh, wow.
And my
Okay.
dad was always my dad was a really good storyteller, as you can imagine. He just not like jokes. He wasn't like a joke teller, but he saw humorous things in so many aspects of life, and they amused him, and then he would recount them and explain why they were so funny to him. And that was his kind of humor. It's hard to explain, but he was just a natural like storyteller.
Right.
But he didn't tell jokes. Hey, like, son, let me tell you this joke. These two guys were, it wasn't that kind of humor.
There's two priests in a bar.
Yeah, yeah. It was more like you won't believe what happened to me the other day, and it's like what I observed, that kind of thing.
Right.
So apparently, he told a lot of these stories to his friends, of course,
Mm-hmm.
and he never told them some of them to me. When I heard them, I'm like, wow, those are great stories.
Not to change the subject, but I just remember the question I was going to ask you, and it goes back to the whole 50th anniversary.
Yeah.
There was supposed to have been a documentary. I think
Yeah.
somebody was working on a documentary on that. Do you know if that ever came out?
No, and I'm trying to think of his name. Sometimes
Yeah, and I remember
by
seeing
my
like a
age,
trailer for it, and I think he had even
yeah,
like a
John
GoFundMe or something for it.
Lathier or something. You know what? If you go online, look, all I know about it is I on my
I
Facebook
remember
page,
you mentioning it
I
on your
got a
Facebook
request from
page.
this guy, and I feel bad. I want to say his name is like John Lathier, but I think that's wrong. But you can certainly Google and find out. It was going to be called like the Exorcist 50th anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
I remember seeing the trailer on there.
yeah,
There's like
but
a short
anyway,
trailer
apparently
for
he's
it.
been working on it for years, and he
Mm-hmm.
interviewed, some of the real principals,
Yeah.
Chris Newman and Chuck Waters, who was the stuntman, and I think he interviewed
Mm-hmm.
Linda Blair, and he didn't interview my dad or Freakin', but a lot of the the heavy hitters on the movie. And he sent me some clips of what he had done in the interviews, and they were great. And the narration,
Right.
and he was doing a GoFundMe because, he has some other job. And, he was trying to raise like $100,000 or something. And I think
What if I can reach out and see if he'll come on? Maybe.
well, he'd probably be a really interesting guy.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it seems like he was trying to get it together in time for this anniversary. And now
Right.
I don't see why it couldn't be done, but you know how it is. People, they lose interest and they move on to the next thing. I don't mean
Right.
him, but I mean the public, who knows if the Exorcist will ever be talked about again as much as it has been.
100th anniversary.
Yeah.
75th anniversary.
Well, I wish my dad had, and I wish Friedkin had made it like all the way to, but my dad wasn't into these retrospectives and these
right.
screenings and this and that. He was just like a working writer who was just very practical about it,
Mm-hmm.
getting the work done. And he wasn't into the interviews and being celebrated and stuff. He was always reluctant to make any kind of the Exorcist Steps commemoration.
Yeah.
I pretty much had to talk him into it. He said, no, they invited me, but I'm not going. And I go, Dad, you have to go. William Friedkin's going, the president of the university. It's like, it's a big deal. He lived right there down the street almost.
Right.
Said, you have to go.
Huh.
He said, oh, yeah, I guess I should. And, he went reluctantly. And I think he really enjoyed it, because what happened was there was a line that went on for, I'm not kidding, it was like a mile. And the fans just loved to meet them. And the thing was, it wasn't like one of these conventions where you pay $100 to get in.
Yeah.
It was free. You brought your book or your poster, and they signed everything. They didn't charge $25, $50.
I heard somewhere along the lines, Linda Blair wasn't going to show up unless there was some monies involved. Probably. Well, she probably would have directed it toward her animal rescue.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, I've met Linda a couple times, but I don't really know her. I've talked to her a couple times. She seemed like a really, really nice person. I had years ago, in a couple hours I spent with her, or an hour and a half, just talking about it. And she was, in a bar somewhere, and she was really engaging, really a nice person, interesting person. But because she's doing this animal rescue thing, I mean, she was really dependent on that to maintain, her charitable work and what she was doing. And so I think she made it a point that in order to make appearances, Warner Brothers had to pay her,
right?
And there were times when Warner Brothers just didn't want to pay anyone. It was just, you're going to do it, whatever, or if you don't want to do it. And I don't know if it's true. I heard that she said unless they paid her, but it wasn't because of greed. It was because she had to, support her.
Right.
And it was too bad. It would have been great if she had been there. But I mean, other people weren't there. Ellen Burstyn wasn't there. And who else could have come? So,
man. I don't know if he's still alive or not.
He is. Chuck Waters wanted.
He could do a demonstration.
Well, he wanted to.
Here's how you do it.
He wanted to be there, but he wasn't able to come unless somebody had sent him the ticket, and nobody sent him a ticket.
That bites.
It's too bad. He shouldn't have. They should.
Yeah, that would have been great.
And sent him. But yeah. But anyway, so my dad went, and I asked him after. I said, well, so was that so bad? And he said, no, I mean, I really enjoyed talking to the fans and, realizing how much they appreciated, his work and so on. It was a rare opportunity.
Wow. That is awesome.
And all that sign stuff that you see out there on eBay and stuff, almost 90% of it, I'm sure, came from that day, because people would sometimes bring like 10 things to sign, and they always had a rule.
Oh, yeah.
You can sign one thing, but then you have to get back in line. And some people did.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, even on that, maybe, it would have been all free, right? So, So, that would have been awesome. I wish someone could have recorded that. I'm sure somebody did.
Well, there are. I've seen videos, little bits and pieces.
I've seen those too, but something a little fuller. I've seen some stuff that Friedkin had done, or someone had recorded. In a more of accountable thing than just the.
Well, what I did. Bits. What I did, which was kind of fun, is the tombs. Which is one of the scenes is set in the tomb. They had a special that day of pea soup for lunch.
Oh, great.
Which they don't really have. That was like their little tribute, but they didn't really advertise it. Just if you went in there, that was on the menu. And when I found that out, I thought, well, this would be great to send some pea soup over to my dad and to Friedkin while they were signing.
Right.
So I went and I bought a couple of bowls of soup, and I asked the waiter, can I tip you? If I tip you, will you go over in your whites, their outfit, and deliver these to my dad and Friedkin? So they did. And there was pictures of it, but I don't know if there was a video of it because I didn't take one. But they brought them, and my dad and preacher were like, "What is this?"
Yeah, the reaction would have been
My
priceless.
dad was giving this look like, I'm not sure I want to eat this, But they were stuck out there for hours, and I think they did end up
Right.
eating just out of starvation.
Yeah,
You know.
that's funny.
Mm.
That is funny. Do we have any other questions from the group? Anybody else? I don't know how your battery is.
Well, it's pretty
On your,
low, but I mean, I think if I don't mind going until it runs out, but it's getting down there. But if anybody, I'm not soliciting uh, Facebook friends, but if anybody listens to this and has a specific question that hasn't been answered that wants to
yeah,
write to me on Facebook, message me, I don't answer that. I mean,
right.
I'll try to
Well,
answer.
maybe we could do another live chat maybe after the holidays if anybody's up for that, and maybe some questions will come up. What
Yeah.
would be the chances of having, like, say, Mary Jo on?
Well, Mary Jo passed away. My sister
Oh,
died.
she did. I
Yeah,
didn't
she
know
died
that.
about
I'm
5
sorry.
years ago. No, but
Wow.
well, you wouldn't know. She died at the age of 65, which is pretty young these days.
Yeah.
And yeah, we'll see. When I say she was the basis, is yeah, I mean, my sister loved art. She loved horses. All the dialogue between Chris and Reagan is my mom and Mary Jo at the time
Mm-hmm.
that my parents were divorced, because that had just happened, and my dad subconsciously maybe wrote it into his book. That was all about my parents' divorce, and so he was absolutely thinking of Mary Jo, and he created the character around Mary Jo. And as I say, at some point there was a figure that Kinderman finds. Remember the bottom of the steps, a clay figure.
Yeah.
He realizes it seems to be tied somehow to the house, to the little
Mm-hmm.
girl. And it was like a clay figure of
Was it a turtle?
a turtle, I think, something.
Yeah.
At some point, my dad wanted to change it to a teddy bear.
Right.
And
He was pushing the bears thing.
Friedkin says we can't change it because in the book, it's a turtle or something like that. And my dad points out when he tells the story, he said, the reason I wanted to change it to a bear is that my daughter,
Used to call him Papa Bear.
yeah, I called
And
her
she was,
baby bear and she called me
yeah.
Papa Bear. And
Yeah.
he's more or less says she is the model for Reagan,
Mm-hmm.
and she is 100%. And
Right.
it's uncanny because Friedkin is the one who chose and hired Linda Blair, but she's a spitting image of what my sister looked like at that age, about the age of 12.
Oh, that's
And
interesting. I
and
don't
in
suppose you
fact,
have photos
and in
of
fact, when
Mary
I
Jo
when I
from
when
back
I
then.
met and chatted with Linda Blair, really for the first time, because on the set I met her, but she was 12, 13. I had no interest
Right.
in hanging out and chatting with Linda Blair,
Right.
But I met her in her adulthood when she was 40
Sure.
something, and she said to me, "Oh, let's go somewhere and so we can talk." And that's when we really had a full conversation, about an hour and a half, and I told her things she didn't know about The Exorcist. And I said, your part, Reagan, is based on my sister, Mary Jo. And she had no
Mm-hmm.
idea. And she was kind of very curious about that. But I had hoped that the two could meet because my sister was living in LA and still alive when she had her, um, rescue thing out in the desert. And one day I said to Mary Jo, we
Right.
should go out and we should, you should meet Linda Blair. But then it never happened, unfortunately. It would have been interesting. I
I
think.
wonder how hot it is out there.
Oh yeah, I've never been out to it, but apparently it is. But one thing I will say, I'm happy for her that she got that little cameo in
Oh, yeah.
Believer,
Yeah.
because I hope and trust that they had to pay her a lot of money.
Yeah.
She would have put,
or at least donated to her foundation. Yeah. I'm usually buying stuff from her website. So I've got mugs, I've got shirts, that kind of thing. A lot of the autographs, So I've put some money out there. I wouldn't mind helping with that.
Yeah.
it would be.
Well, my
great.
dad apparently used to send something every Christmas, you know.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Here, I'm going to grab this question. We got one more, I think. See how many more we get. Michael, what did you think of Doctor Sleep?
That's Stephen King, right?
Yeah, that would be like the follow up to The Shining.
You're touching on a.
Is that the book or the movie, or both?
Okay. Well, so you're touching on a sensitive subject there. I haven't read Stephen King, nor has my dad. I mean, I've read a page or two, but again, you know, neither of us is really into like horror novels. You know, I love some of his movies that were based on some of his work, like obviously Stand By Me, based on The Body. I love that movie. I love The Shining. But I'll tell you, the truth is, he's not since I don't read horror, you know, I haven't read. So I haven't read these books. But what happened is a little bit of sour grapes. When The Exorcist first came out, King's book, Dance Macabre, came out at some point in which he talked about The Exorcist. And at the time, he said some very negative things, which really I found really offended me. He said about The Exorcist. He said, Blatty belongs to the plotting tract school of horror fiction. And he said something like Blatty's got no sense of humor. And he says, with any luck, Blatty has fallen silent and we won't hear from him again. Okay. Those were the comments he made about The Exorcist. And I pointed that out to my dad at some point. I guess it was like indiscreet of me. I probably shouldn't have. But my dad said something positive about that Stephen King had said something nice to him. And I said, well, that's weird because he really trashes you in this book. And he goes, well, really? What did he say? And I told him, and he said, my dad didn't really care the way I did. It really bugged me.
Sure.
Because he's a fellow writer. And I thought, why would you say something like not just that you didn't like the book, but that you hope he never writes again? And my dad said to me, well, that really surprises me, because he said I ran into Stephen King in like the green room on one of these talk shows. And he said he came up to me and was effusive and said to me, Bill, you know, Mr. Blatty, I have to thank you. He said, you're kind of my literary father, because if it hadn't been for the success of The Exorcist, Harry never would.
I remember that story.
Now, this is what my dad told me King said to him. And so he said that it really surprised him that King had said this. And then I said, well, look, I think I'm going to write to King and I'm going to tell him. And my dad said, no. He said, he was very polite to me. Don't go stirring anything up. He said, I don't care what he had to say. He said, I tried to read him once and I found him unreadable. So, yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, you know, but I mean, I think my dad only read a page or two. But so anyway, so when I hear Stephen King, but having said that, everything I've read about him, and I actually attended a talk he gave once at Harvard. And I was really impressed with him. Seems like a really nice guy. And so I have to think those comments were just a moment of like indiscretion of something, because when my dad passed away, he tweeted that he said, so long, old Bill, you know, the author of the great horror novel of our time. That's what he said.
There you go.
The Exorcist was the great horror novel of our time. So I thought I think maybe it was his way of making amends for what he had written.
Right.
Anyway, so I'm sorry. There's a long way of saying I haven't read King and I won't read King. Because
no, but it's real interesting that you brought that up. That's that's a good story.
But my dad had it didn't bother him. He said, actually, my dad said to me, I would describe that just probably professional jealousy. That was my dad's take on it.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
But he wouldn't have responded personally, and he wouldn't have said that personally, you know.
Sure.
Yeah. Anyway.
Sure. Yeah. Hard to say.
Yeah.
But well, we're hitting like almost 2:30. Unless I got any more questions from the group. Anybody have any other questions? I think I ran out of questions. I'm sure I'll have more questions later.
Well,
they just need to
pull. Like we talked about a lot.
Yeah, we did. I do appreciate you coming on.
Oh no, I'm happy to. You're a good guy. I know we met, and It was nice meeting you. And, I'm happy I'm happy to have an opportunity to talk to people who are enthusiastic about my dad's work, because I think it's great. Any writer, wants to be remembered and wants people to keep reading him. And
Right.
so I think it's great. He never imagined that there would be this sort of interest and enthusiasm for either the book or film at the time that he
Right.
was making them. So, um, I'm happy to be able to answer questions. I just wish I had more answers than I do. And I wish that my dad was around so he could actually answer these. He'd obviously have more accurate answers than I do.
Oh, let's see if we can catch this question real quick.
Okay.
If we can. Just
Yeah.
kind of came up. William King, what was it like for you during the Exorcist frenzy during 1974?
Okay. And what did you say about King?
It's William King is asking this question.
Oh,
What
William
was it?
King.
Yeah. Were
Yeah.
you thinking maybe somebody like Stephen King's
No,
Alias or something? Since we're
but
talking about Stephen
there
King.
was a Father King who was a priest and a Jesuit and taught religion at Georgetown while I was there.
Oh wow!
And a
Was their
lot of
name William?
people, and he presided over what was, he didn't call it, but it became known as the Mystery Mass while I was an undergraduate at Georgetown.
Huh.
At midnight, he would have a mass in Dahlgren Chapel, where the desecrations happen, and
Right.
he would. It would be dark in there with just candlelit, and then suddenly he would rise from behind the altar, and
Okay.
his cape, and it was very dramatic. And so his name was Father Richard King. And when I heard King, I thought it was a question about Father King.
Oh, huh. That would have been
Anyway,
interesting.
but
Again,
what happened was at the time, because of his sort of mystery mass, a lot of people were asking my dad and if he had based the character of Father Marin upon Father King, which
funny.
he had not.
No.
So what was it like? Do you mean what was it like at
What
college?
was it like for you during the Exorcist
Frenzy? Well,
1974.
I fall back on the word surreal, which is kind of a cliched word, but it felt surreal. It was kind of crazy. It's hard to explain. I mean, it wasn't like Beatlemania. It wasn't as big as that, but I would liken it to that in that it was this sort of trendy, crazy fascination with exorcism and devils that the Exorcist seemed to kind of like unleash. And it wasn't gloomy or dark. It was just, Newsweek put out a cover and it was called The Exorcism Frenzy.
Right.
And that's what he's getting that from. And it was hard. It felt unreal. It must have been the same for my dad. It was like, why is this such a big deal? Like people would recognize my name, especially in Georgetown, like even on a check or receipt, they go, Blatty. Once I bought something, it was around the time they were filming. This person said to me, he said, Blatty, you're not related to that freak who wrote The Exorcist, are you? And I said, well, my dad did write The Exorcist. And then they said, oh, I didn't mean to be offensive, but I mean, you got to admit that book is really weird. He said to me, So, yeah, I mean, it was just, yeah, I think my dad probably felt the same way. It's hard to, even today, it's hard to account for what chord that struck in people and what it was that made the whole topic so much of interest to people. I mean, I understand the popularity of the book. It's a really well-written book. I mean, they called it a page turner,
Oh yeah, it is.
Great.
Yes.
It's great storytelling. I mean, it's not great literature. I mean, it's really well written. There are some really beautiful passages, but more than anything, it's a great story. And so that was the reason for the popularity, in addition to the sensational aspects, obviously. But once the movie came out and the story started to go around about people fainting and throwing up, then it just became exponential. Right. Then it became like the thing to do. So yeah, I mean, that's as well as I can explain it. It's disconcerting because it's like, why? But authors are not like rock stars. They're not like, people don't recognize them and people don't ask for their autographs. You know what I mean? So I didn't have a situation where I was with my dad and people, were, ran up. Oh my God, the author of The Exorcist. The funny thing, that story that I may have told you that maybe people haven't heard is kind of funny, is that around, I don't know, maybe it was the 30th or 40th anniversary of Father Father O'Malley, rather,
Mhm.
was a friend of my dad's. I was at my dad's for Thanksgiving in DC, and Father O'Malley was there. And I said to them, it was the anniversary of the Exorcist. I said, you know what? We should go down to the stairs and go to the tombs and have lunch. My dad was like, no. Oh, come on. All three of us were in the movie, Dyer, O'Malley was Dyer. My dad had the little cameo as the producer, and I had my little cameo, and I said, we should go down, so my dad reluctantly went. We went in the tombs. And the funny thing is, the waitress there said, oh my gosh, I know who you are. And we all thought they were talking about my dad.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, your Father Dyer. She said, oh, Mel, your Father
Yeah.
Dyer. She didn't know them. I didn't recognize my dad, and she asked for an autograph from Father Dyer. But then we went across the stairs, and there were always people taking pictures.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this group of people taking pictures, and they went up to my dad, who reluctantly was there with me,
Mm-hmm.
and he didn't take pictures and stuff. And they said to one of them went up to my dad, says, excuse me, would you mind
I remember that
picture? Yeah. And so he took their picture, politely. And then I couldn't resist. I said, I shouldn't say anything, but I just want you to know who took your pictures, like the author of The Exorcist. And they were like, oh my God.
Would you sign my camera?
Yeah, and they couldn't believe it, because imagine if you were there and you thought it was kind of a spooky book, and you just happened to be there, and you asked the author, it's just afterward you would say, that's not a coincidence. There's something going on here. You know what I mean? But it was just a coincidence. But I mean, my dad was just, that's the last thing he wanted, is to be identified. That's the way he was. He didn't like the celebrity aspect of it. But again, because, he was the writer behind the scenes, and he didn't have to deal with it the way an actor would have to.
No, I like that. That's a good story too.
Yeah. But there've been all these.
I'll go ahead.
No, well, I was just going to say there have been a number of sociological studies and psychological studies, and I've read some of them. And my dad always thought that they were ridiculous. He always said, "This nonsense," They always had this theory. What he meant to say, he's telling an allegory about the sexual development of young girls, or about
I've heard that one.
And he always dismissed them out of hand. But I think some of that is maybe subconscious is going on.
That could be.
But I still am, for myself, I'm not able to kind of account for exactly what it was. My dad thought it had to do with people starting to believe maybe there is a God, maybe there are devils, and maybe they're starting to worry about the way they're living their lives, and that it kind of unnerved people for that reason. It made them wonder, maybe I can go to hell if I keep doing this stuff. That was kind of my dad's theory, is why that was the nerve he thought it touched in them, almost like fear.
Real quick, when we were talking about characters based on other people, do you have any idea who Father Dyer was based around, or did he know Father O'Malley at the time?
No, he didn't know Father O'Malley.
I didn't think so.
Dyer. That's a good question. I don't think I've been asked it, or really.
Yeah, I didn't think about it until bringing up you guys going and eating out, and then.
No, that's a very good question. I don't think he was based. I'm not aware that he was based on anyone. I think my dad, when he was writing the novel, must have just wanted to have a character that Caris confided in,
Right.
probably
Yeah.
mostly about his mother
Hmm.
and his grief over the death of his mother. So I think he needed uh, someone the way Hamlet had Horatio.
Hmm.
You know, my dad loved the play Hamlet, and I think that was maybe the kind of relationship he was setting up. Hamlet, Horatio, a foil for Hamlet.
I think there's a lot of King Lear in your.
Yeah, but yeah, oh yeah, because my dad loved Shakespeare and Reagan. Of course, the name is based
Yeah.
on King Lear,
Yeah.
on Reagan, the
And I noticed King Lear
God.
being brought up a lot.
Yeah, and but the way my dad chose ended up with O'Malley is I think O'Malley wrote to my dad criticizing something about
Right.
the Exorcist, or I think he wrote to criticizing the depiction of the Jesuit priest in the Exorcist, saying it was a cliche, that they all
Mhm.
drank whiskey and they were all like, you know, this and that. And he wrote a very kind of thorough criticism to my dad. My dad was kind of intrigued and thought he had a lot of good points. So they met in New York at one point, and my dad liked him, and you know, was kind of a handsome guy. And I think my dad, you know, he was kind of a ham and liked to act, I think. And I think my dad is the one who said, "Would you like to maybe play Dyer?" And you know, O'Malley was thrilled to do it
Oh yeah, I
because he
bet.
was kind of a ham.
Yeah, that's pretty
So
cool.
yeah, but but that's a good question, man. I would have to say he was like my dad's, like Horatio.
Okay. I was just curious if he had somebody he could, you know, share on the griefs.
Yeah, not that
Maybe
I
he was
know of.
going
But I'll
through.
tell you this, this is true. It's gonna sound like I made it up. But when my dad was making uh Exorcist 3,
Yeah.
he briefly suggested to me, this is true. I don't think I've told anyone. He briefly suggested to me that he might, if I was interested, he might cast me in the part. Uh I don't know whether that was just to to be nice to me, or whether he thought it'd be kind of cool. And I had never I mean, I acted in high school and in college, as my dad did, but I never had any interest in a career in acting. So, I mean, at
Interesting.
one time he thought maybe he just thought he wouldn't have to pay me anything.
Yeah, that might have been it.
You know,
I'm gonna cut some costs here. You want to play in
I would
this?
have done it. I would have done it, but you know, but it didn't. Maybe he thought I looked a little bit like O'Malley, you know, older, you know, or something.
Here we got a late question
Mhm.
here. Marcus the Blade. Do you know if your dad was satisfied with the 2000 extended version? Did he consider it definitive?
Is that the same as the director's cut? Because I really mixed them up. Can I
I'm
ask
gonna
him?
guess so. We probably just kind of cover it.
Well,
They're pretty. They're the extended version's pretty close to.
if they are, I would say this. My dad would have considered. My dad definitely preferred
Scenes
the
added back in.
the version, you know, the director's cut with the
Mhm.
scene at the end between Kinderman and
Mhm.
Dyer, and the addition of the dialogue on the steps. I'm not sure what his opinion was, and I doubt that he particularly approved of the added visual images, you know, of
Yeah.
Pazuzu and the flickering lights and this and that, and the added music. But the rearrangement of some of the scenes, you know, which made more sense. There were definitely improvements. But my dad was adamant that he wanted that ending, which is the ending in the novel, back
Mhm.
in. So he definitely would have preferred that version. And he was grateful to Friedkin for you know, for putting that back in. I don't like the addition of it. It's, to me, it's clunky. As you know, they had to, you know, dub it because the sound was bad, and that original ending to me is a bit. But again, he's the writer. Yeah,
Right.
that was his preferred version. But whenever they show it, like a one night screening, and they do the extended, I always think my dad would approve, but I'd rather they were showing the original. I'm just like an originalist, you know. I like the first, even with all the flaws, which is why I like Killer Kane much
Right.
better than Ninth. It's got a lot of problems, but it's just like it's the original, you know.
Right. Right. What were your thoughts on, say, okay, that one scene where Chris passes the medal to Father Dyer, but then he passes it back to her?
Yeah.
Do you think? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well,
That back in?
I think my recollection is that all this metal stuff, I don't recall that it's in the book.
No, it's not in the book, but
Yeah, so,
you
this
could
was
have kept
all
it in,
this
or
was all this was all Friedkin's doing.
yeah,
I like the symbol reoccurring throughout the film. I like that it appears in the dig, and then it's in Caris's dream, and then it's passed because, as you know, we talked about it, and you did a film about it. The metal was so important in my dad's life and his relationship with his mother and his
sure.
belief.
It pretty much followed your dad. You know, the
Yeah.
ins and
So
outs
yeah, he kind of
of
took the clue
Caris.
from my dad. I think it's like he gives it back to her like it's going to protect you, right? Isn't that the point?
Something.
I think that was
Yeah.
Friedkin's doing.
I
And
think one thing that's noticeable though is when you hear Dyer say, "Here, you keep it." You know, I think they used O'Malley's voice, you know, more
oh,
in present day because you can really hear the gruff of his age in the
oh,
voice. I think I would have used a younger man's voice that could almost sound like him
yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure. But I mean,
because you can totally tell in his voice. He's like, "Here, you keep it," that kind of thing.
right. You know, in these sites that people ask me questions about this detail and that, and like, was this your dad and this? And I often don't know the answer. And sometimes I think people they almost give the filmmakers too much credit. I mean,
Hmm.
they obviously were creative and clever and so on, but I don't think they were intending half of the things that some of these fans are suggesting. Like, there's a whole page online about the song and the, and the party scene in The Exorcist and the meaning of the song. And,
Sure.
did
Yeah.
my dad or did Friedkin deliberately? And maybe it's like the Paul is dead thing where John Lennon was putting all kinds of stuff in that even Paul McCartney didn't know about.
Yeah.
But a lot of it, I think, is just people are reading a little too much into it. And in that sense, they almost give the filmmakers too much credit for that. They were so diabolically clever that all these things were
I know.
intentional.
You would think there'd be a lot of time spent, and if
Yeah.
you're on a number crunch
But
or
I
even
mean,
a time
Friedkin,
crunch.
he was such a professional. And
Hmm.
when he was making the film, he insisted everything had to be just so. So
Hmm.
there may be things that he did that even my dad wasn't aware of that he was doing for a reason, you know.
Sure. Hmm. I can see that. I can see that song being added for effect in the sense of like the
Yeah,
foreshadowing.
it's possible. Yeah,
But
because somebody printed what the words were, and it's like talks about a
sure.
guy falling downstairs.
Yeah, I did a video on that one too.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, so yeah, I tend to poo-poo these things, but I mean, maybe that's not fair because it's possible. It never occurred to me. I wish I had asked my dad a lot of these questions, but they never even occurred to me when I watched the film. I never for a second thought, I wonder if this song has anything to do with, you know, anything.
You know, because it's weird
I
because you go back to
don't
the
listen to
novel,
the
it's not
song.
the songs that they were singing. So I don't know.
I wish I had gotten together with. I meant to get in touch with O'Malley before he died because I met him, of course, on the set and while they were making the film. And when my dad remarried, like the third time in Las Vegas, I was with O'Malley a lot. Like in the casinos and stuff, and just hanging.
Hmm.
And he was really an interesting guy, really a smart guy, and really fun to be around. And then, I got to know him a little bit better, like at that one Thanksgiving when he came to my dad's for Thanksgiving. And, I don't know, he and my dad had a falling out. I can't go into all the details, but they had a falling out.
Is that why he didn't reprise the role in the third one, or
No, I
different?
think this happened after the fact. I don't know why he didn't, you know. Frankly, I never thought that O'Malley was a very good actor. I mean, I don't really like
Well,
part of Dyer. That's just
hmm.
my own, I don't mean to put him down, but I think he's one of the few
Well,
awkward characters in the movie.
sure.
So I don't you know, it would have been nice to see him because he was in the original, but they had a kind of a falling out, but I always felt bad about it because I liked him a lot. And over the years, I meant to drop in on him, just go one day and just show up and say hello. And then finally I never did. And then he died, you know, and then I realized he died he only died like about 6 months ago. He lived to be like 90.
Yeah.
And the last time I saw him, he was probably 20 years ago. He's probably 70 or something.
Yeah.
But it was interesting because, you know, my dad was a conservative Catholic and he was kind of, I would call a liberal Catholic. And they had some really intense arguments about religion that I finally had to get up from the table because they got really, you know, not Father O'Malley. He was pretty calm, but my dad got pretty excited because he thought he was way too liberal, you know, and it wasn't
right.
Church teachings. And I remember my dad saying to him at one point, "You call yourself a Catholic priest?" Yeah, you know, I thought, well, he is a Catholic priest, you know. Anyway.
Well, you think like some of the interests that your dad had kind of go against his own beliefs when it came down to say like interest in the paranormal or anything like that?
Went against his own beliefs?
Yeah. Was there anything in I'm not familiar with Catholicism, so I don't know what they say again when it comes to like EVP or paranormal, whether or not he should be interested in that at all, or.
Well, here, I think that, you know, I don't think that would have interfered with his Catholic faith because Catholicism, like all religion, basically believes in a God and in most of it in an afterlife. And so I don't think there's any objection to the idea that it might be possible to contact souls in the spirit world. Right. Certainly the Catholic Church would be opposed to anything to deal with what I call the occult or with attempts to contact a devil or be in contact with a demon. I think the Catholic Church, would, because I grew up a Catholic, would think it's possible for someone to reach a demon through a Ouija board or something and would disapprove of that. You know, but I don't think my dad ever dabbled in anything that, certainly my dad never tried to contact demons or derive powers from demons the way I understand Satanists do. Maybe don't understand it really, but he did at times use Ouija boards at times to see him reach, you know, his mother and other people who had died. And he finally concluded he did feel like some of the sort of fundamentalists feel that the Ouija board is dangerous and that you can get yourself in trouble by dabbling with that kind of stuff. My dad's thought was more that it wasn't so much you got in touch with demons as you got in touch with the unconscious, which can
I remember him saying
which can happen. Yeah, but that's more of you're getting in touch with inner sides of yourself that may not be good. You know, as opposed that he didn't believe like the Ouija board is the devil's work, you know, and don't touch that thing because that's demon inspired, you know.
Well, I noticed you. I remember you mentioning something about UFOs and whatnot. He was interested in that as well.
Yeah, but I don't think that's not okay. I think I'm almost done, Mary.
Yeah, we're getting there.
I think, but anyway, I don't think he ever had any beliefs that the Catholic Church would have found heretical, you know.
Right.
Because if there were flying saucers, they were then creatures created by God, or you know.
Right.
You know.
Right. I'm just thinking as far as like, you know, like so many believing that we're the only intelligent life on Earth and there's nothing else in the universe, that kind of thing. I didn't know how far that.
Well, I mean, I think. You know, why a believer, Catholic or otherwise, would think that evidence of life on other planets is somehow an attempt to disprove God's existence? To me, that's crazy. I mean, why do we have to be the only intelligent life in the universe? You know, it's crazy.
Right.
I mean, obviously, the people who wrote the Bible thought we were the only ones, and maybe we are, but it still seems highly unlikely.
You know, I'm curious, not to just kind of going back on when earlier on when you were talking about. I think you said you have some of your kids are into the like the Hollywood business a little bit.
Mhm.
And how about siblings? Was anybody interested in going that direction?
No,
You're
nobody.
like,
That's
huh?
a good question because I have, I had my two sisters. Neither of them were ever interested in going to film business, and then I have a half sister who was, like her mother was kind of a semi-professional tennis player,
Hmm.
and who is very involved in Ukraine right now. Trying to.
Okay.
She was in went to West Point and was over in Iraq, and so she's the only vet in the family. After my
Hmm.
dad, so she has no interest. And then I have a half brother who's in the restaurant business and has a few restaurants in New Orleans, and then I have my youngest half brother who's um, studied, I think, political science and history, and is now working in the Justice Department, I think. So yeah, nobody. I think they're probably all like me. Is like you kind of want to. I don't know. You don't want to be in the shadow of somebody or someone who only got their job because, I mean, there's tons of nepotism in Hollywood. It's like almost half
Right.
the people are big, and that's not really a problem if you have some talent. It's almost an unfair advantage. But there have been plenty of people who've gotten jobs because of their father or whatnot, who do great work.
Right.
But
Right.
yeah, so none of them have.
That's interesting.
Seems unlikely that nobody would. Well, but then again, my two sons are, and it's not because of their grandfather. It's just they almost came into it accidentally.
Sure.
Like one of my sons was really interested in being a mechanic, and went
Hmm.
to mechanic school, went to college, but also loved cars and this and that.
Sure.
And
Hmm.
then he decided he really didn't want to do that. A buddy of his was working at a small like production company and says, "Hey, we need someone to kind of almost be a gopher. This was many years ago, and run errands and run the Xerox." And my son took it, and he was there and then working his way up for like 10 years now. He's like a producer, and
Oh, well.
and then my other son started out in editing books for Abrams in New York, and now he's a film editor.
Hmm. Was he the one that made suggestions to you about your book? I remember you saying something. There was like a program or something that he
Oh, yeah,
suggested.
my other son, my
Oh,
first
I'm
son I
sorry.
mentioned, I was telling him that, I was struggling because of my eyes and vision problems,
Hmm.
typing it up and this and that. He says, "Well, you just record it into your laptop and whatnot, and then we'll have a machine that'll transcribe." And other people have said, "Just give me a sample of your handwriting, and there's a machine that will read your handwriting and type, all this kind of stuff." I'm just such a dinosaur. I hardly knew how to turn this thing on. So I've no
That's
experience.
okay. That's so my.
So
I'm
yeah,
just winging it.
yeah. Well, you know a lot more than I do. I have to ask my wife or my son or somebody to do almost
Yeah, actually, your
like
son
it
was
is.
really great the first time around helping you out. I thought it was awesome.
Yeah. Well,
So,
I'm one of these procrastinators. I wait the last second and then I'm frantically, where's the plug? Where do I go?
no, you're doing good.
My wife said, "What program do you have to go?" I said, "I have no idea. I just go to the messages and I push the button and I don't know."
Yeah, for everybody yeah, for everybody that's watching right now, when we first came on before went live, I think you relocated about 4 times because
Oh
of the
yeah, I was
lighting.
running around to
So
different rooms trying to
yeah,
see if it would
so
work.
I got to follow him around in his house a
Oh
little
yeah,
bit,
well the pig.
and we got to meet his pig.
Yeah.
And he was gonna open with that and say, "Keep
Oh
away, the
yeah.
sow is mine." It's
Where is
funny.
it? Oh, the pig isn't even in there anymore. My wife put him out.
I was like,
Yeah.
oh wow. Okay, so we're going on 3 o'clock,
Yeah.
my time, four
Oh yeah.
o'clock your time. I'm sure you've got stuff that you need to do. If there's any other questions, real quick, from anyone, you want to ask it now,
Or
or
forever hold your peace.
or maybe we can do another Q&A or something after the holidays.
Well, I
if you're
mean,
open for it.
I wouldn't say no. I mean, you're a nice guy, and if there's enough interest, but I'm sure we can down the road. I mean,
Sure.
yeah, I would do it again sometime, but probably not in the immediate future because, like, I'm kind of burned myself out on
Oh, I'm sure.
Exorcist. Not you. It's not because of this recording. It's just like I've just paid too much attention to it, and
Oh yeah,
you
especially
know.
with the whole 50th anniversary and all
But I
that.
felt, but
And
I felt like because my dad is gone and Freakin's gone, and I felt like I felt like almost an
well, I
obligation.
appreciate it, and I'm sure a lot of people have appreciated your input on a lot of this stuff.
Well, again, a lot of it is just my personal opinion about stuff, and the details. Like I say, the go-to guy is uh, Mark Kermode in terms
Right.
of
I've
detail.
actually messaged him, and I haven't gotten anywhere.
I
So
think I tried to send him a message once and didn't get a response. So
yeah, I haven't gotten any kind of response.
I don't know.
It'd be interesting to have him on, or be on his program, one of the two.
We almost came to the
So
Exorcist Steps thing, but it was a kind of, you had to get yourself there. I think he was wondering if Warner Brothers would send him, and they weren't sending anybody. It was really put together by, I can't even remember his name, just this exorcist fanatic who thought it would be a nice thing to do, and he's the guy who actually organized it. It was his idea. He got in touch with the president of the university and with the mayor, and he got in touch with Friedkin and reached out to my dad, and it was really this one guy's idea that they ought to memorialize the
yeah.
steps as the Exorcist steps. And when I was a student there, let's just say before The Exorcist came out, when I was a freshman, I used to go up
Mhm.
and down those steps. I was on the crew team, and we used to run it up and down the steps 3 times, 2 steps at a time, to get in
Right.
shape. And of course, I never in a million years imagined that these steps would figure in The Exorcist, or that anybody would be talking about these steps like 50 years later. It's
Yeah.
crazy. In my dad's day, they actually are called the M Street steps,
Or the
because M
Hitchcock
Street is the
steps.
street, or the what?
Or the Hitchcock steps.
Well, yeah, but the actual name, I think the official name is the M Street steps, because they were
Right.
the steps that led down to M Street at the bottom. And in my dad's day, and I don't know when it began, that's when it became called the Hitchcock steps, named
Mhm.
after the 39 steps, the Alfred Hitchcock and whatnot. Some kind of tie in there. And my dad, in his day, which was at Georgetown from 1946 to 1950, knew them as the Hitchcock steps.
Right.
And of course, after the movie came out, then people started referring to them as
Mhm.
Exorcist steps. But now they are officially
The Exorcist
Exorcist
steps.
steps.
Yeah. It's funny, when I hear M Street Steps, I think that would make a good name for a soft jazz band or
Oh
something.
yeah,
Hey, we're the
the M
M
Street
Street.
steps.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
the M Street Steps.
Piano riffs or something. But
Yep.
I can't go, and I go there because one of my sons lives in, right across the bridge in Roslyn from Georgetown. And so
Mhm.
when I visit him, of course, I have to go to Georgetown, as I love the campus. And there has never been a time when I've gone up or down those steps that there haven't been tourists taking pictures, and
Oh, I'm sure.
taking pictures of each other and lying at the bottom and so on. And it's just like, I don't know. They become, it's overused, that word iconic. But think of what are the most famous steps in the world now. There are the Spanish steps in Rome.
Mhm.
There are the music box steps in Los Angeles, from the Laurel and Hardy film,
Mhm.
and the Exorcist steps. I don't know. There must be another famous set of steps that I'm forgetting, but
Oh, I'm sure.
these are like the most famous steps now in the world.
Right.
Crazy.
Yeah, I'm hoping to go next year and then, give
Yeah.
it a climb, see how that just to kinda get the
Well,
feel of being there,
the,
and actually being on the steps.
to me, the cool thing is, because think about it, I was a student there 50 years ago. When I go back now, it looks, the campus, if you just go in the main campus, if you go behind and farther, then they've added all these buildings that weren't there before. But if you
Mhm.
go to the main campus, it looks exactly like you just were just in The Exorcist. You just saw
Wow.
The Exorcist. Also, you go down the steps of the library where Chris goes before she takes her walk through town.
Right.
You walk
Right.
through Georgetown.
Yeah,
you
I can see it in my head.
It's
Yeah.
the same. Nothing has changed. It's because there are all these rules and laws that you can't change things. There's a funny story. I'll tell it quickly. Can I get up for him and check one thing for
Sure.
1 second? I mean, just like 10 seconds. Marion? She's gone now.
She's going, are you almost done?
My wife got impatient with me and she sent me a note saying, I'm going. And, if you want to come. And I said to her, just wait like 5 minutes. And I thought she was here. I looked, she's gone.
Oh, she left. Okay.
Anyway.
Well, I'm sorry.
We got fed up. No, it's okay. It was nothing we had to do. But anyway, here's the thing. If you go, you get to the top of the Exorcist steps and you make a left turn, and there's all the townhouses. My dad used to live in one there after The Exorcist, and he bought one that overlooked the Potomac, just a few, about a half a block down from the Prospect Street house, from the Reagan, house.
Right. Yep.
And he used to have a sign on his door that said, "Beware of snakes."
That's not there anymore, is it?
No, but I mean, I never thought it was really funny, but obviously it amused my dad a lot because he had it on his door, this plaque, "Beware of snakes."
Huh.
But anyway, somebody who lives in the house right next to that house has put up these huge figures out of like superheroes or Tron or something. They're these huge like, action figures. I'm talking, they're like 10 feet tall. And one of them is like hanging on the building, I think, the facade, and a couple more are out front. Now, when tourists come by, they're always amazed and they take pictures because it's like,
I'm sure.
you can't miss them.
Huh.
Well, it turns out that they're illegal, that there are laws against putting them there. And the homeowners associations are up in the arms about it. And the homeowners sued the owners of this house to have, because they don't, like it. They're traditionalists and they have their look that they want. They don't want these action figures out front. I mean, they pay millions of dollars for these townhomes. Oh, yeah. But tourists love them. And so somebody told me when I was last there that this guy who over owns the house refuses to remove them. And which is kind of to his credit. He says, screw you, And, but I was told that the city now fines this guy something like $10,000 a day because he's breaking all the laws, and he just pays whatever fine they're charging him. And that's all they can do is fine him, and he doesn't care. He must be fabulously wealthy. Yeah. But anyway, so that's one thing that you'll see that wasn't there in my day, these figures. But I'd love to meet this guy because he's must be some piece of work that he's like, he's determined to just say,
Well, maybe we can meet up there and knock on his door.
It would be an interesting video.
Yeah, it would be. Just like, what's that?
Tourists love them. It's like it's become one of the big tourist sites.
Huh.
Yeah.
I wonder if anyone has that on the internet somewhere.
I don't know. I'm amazed at the number of videos that people have made about the Exorcist steps. I mean, I lost count. I started to watch a couple of them, but then it's just like, they're all the same. It's neat though. When you go to the bottom of the steps, the gas station is still there. The remnants of it. Mm-hmm. It's all abandoned. That you see in the shot when Dyer falls. When Dyer is giving the last rites to Caris. And there's a window that's been constructed at the bottom, this huge like picture window. It looks like some kind of artwork that I think must be referencing the window from The Exorcist, but there's no sign on it. It doesn't say anything. So there's some mysteries involved.
Yeah, hopefully I can get out there next year. So
yeah, I mean, you won't be disappointed. Of course, Washington D.C. is just an incredible city.
I'm definitely going to be hitting you up on some locations to go visit.
I'm surprised, actually. I mean, I know it's farther, but you've been to Portland and you haven't been to Georgetown.
No, not yet.
Yeah, you won't be
No.
disappointed. It's a great city. Don't I would say don't go in the summer if you can avoid it. It's so damn hot and humid.
What about the fall?
Fall is perfect time to go.
That's what I was thinking. Because summer's usually pretty busy for me,
Fall or spring. To me,
work-wise, and fall
when
would probably be better.
I went a couple of falls ago, and I walked all through Georgetown, and so many of the houses have the greatest Halloween decorations. And in the windows of some, they had Reagan,
No.
Reagan dolls, those big life-size dolls in like the windows.
Mhm. Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, it was just fun just looking in the windows and seeing all the stuff as you walk down the street.
Wow.
And that's when they filmed the movie, of course, in October.
Yeah.
So it's like the perfect. Although, when she's walking down the street, so you see all these leaves like falling.
Mhm.
And there was, not that it matters, but there was actually a crane and dropping the leaves overhead.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yeah, they're not
Okay,
leaves.
so you kinda get that impression? Okay.
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, it's typical like the fog when Marin shows up, all, big fog machines. I can still remember them
Oh, yeah.
out the
So
big.
what about, like, say, the Behringer Clinic? They were they
Well, I
blowing
wasn't
those
there,
leaves?
I wasn't
I'm
there.
starting to believe that happened now.
Yeah, for unfortunately, and the filming in New York because I was in class,
Right.
and I couldn't go. I did go.
Oh, before you go,
Mhm.
I just remembered the question I wanted to ask,
Okay,
and it had to do with the, house, on Prospect Street.
right.
Now, you did say that, the owner allowed people to come in and take pictures?
No, she allowed. She knew my
I
dad.
mean, as far as, like, for the film, to kinda replicate things?
Well, okay, so I don't know for sure. My presumption is that that she allowed Friedkin or some of his photographers to go and take pictures because he was trying to pretty much recreate the house.
Right, right.
But I mean, I was saying that I was personally in the house with my dad because he had met Frances Mahoney, and
Mhm,
one day he had to go and see her about when they were doing the addition. He had to
mhm.
iron out some details, maybe about how much she was to be paid.
I heard a story that he actually stayed in the house?
My dad.
Yeah,
I never heard that. I mean, it's
okay.
possible, but I don't think it's true. I mean,
Okay, I just
I
wanted
don't
to
know
check.
why he
So here you
I
can hear
don't
all
know why
kinds
he
of
would
things.
have. I don't know why he would have. I know that, the whole time he was there, he and most of the cast, at least, and Friedkin were over at the Marriott Hotel across the river
Mhm,
because it had this spectacular view of the Potomac and of Georgetown campus across the way, and it
mhm.
was just like took 2 minutes to get across the bridge. So he and the cast were over there. Yeah, I mean, it's possible he stayed there one night. I'd be surprised.
Well, I thought maybe, like, in the past before he wrote the book that he was familiar with the
I
house
don't
and had
think
been in
so.
it before. Okay, okay, I just wanted to
I
make
mean,
sure.
you know what? Sometimes I say no, and then it turns out that I'm wrong
Well,
because
I'll look
I
into it
just
and then,
never heard it. You know what I
yeah.
mean? It's like, you know, these things are kind of hard to pin down. I mean, my certainly the house was there when my dad was a student.
Mhm.
I mean,
And then, didn't you mention something about, Friedkin, had, purchased a whole bunch of whatnot to decorate the house so it's, like, very much like the real one for the
well,
interior shots?
well, no, the only thing I can remember is that he wanted it the set to look pretty much like her house,
Right.
and I guess she had some really expensive artwork, I believe, and
Mhm.
he actually managed some of these big museums to loan him some very
Oh,
valuable paintings. Like I don't know what they were, whether they were Renoirs or Matisse's or Cézanne's, or he really knew art and music really well, as you probably know, classical music and art, and
right.
he was such a stickler for realism. I mean, to me,
Oh,
no
yeah.
one's going to notice the difference, but it was important to him that the real things be on the wall. So he actually talked these museums, and the studio probably had to pay a bunch in insurance to cover them, So thank God the real things were not in the set when it burned down.
Oh yeah, I
Because
can't
I
even
don't know
imagine.
what point the real paintings were there, but I don't think any of the real ones were lost in that fire.
Maybe specific shots, and then they just returned
Yeah,
them.
maybe maybe
Maybe
the
maybe
paintings
that
were
was it.
actually in tight
Do
shots.
you do you know if there was anything that, like, say, Ellen Burstyn brought in that was like personal items on the set that kind of she incorporated in the movie? I can't imagine. Oh, we need to bring this Charlie Brown figure and this Snoopy figure in for Reagan's room because it's in the real house or something like that. I was just curious
Yeah.
where a lot of these little knickknacks and whatnot were coming from.
Yeah, I don't I don't I don't think so. It's like the kind of figures that Reagan is making, the clay figures,
Right.
are all things that my dad would have said, this is I want it to look like
Right.
this because this is what we
I'm
want.
just it's just the decoration in the bedroom uh,
Yeah.
for Reagan. I was curious, maybe something maybe Linda Blair brought from her own
Mm.
home, kind of.
Well, I mean, if there are any stories, then they've told them and they're probably true, but I've never heard any of that. Here's the thing, it's like I was there.
Hmm.
And when people hear I was there, they can sometimes ask questions that they expect I would know the answer to.
Hmm.
And the thing was that, number one, I and my dad, nobody ever thought anybody would be curious and would be asking these questions years later. You know what I mean? These
Hmm.
detailed questions. And so, like, had I known anybody would ask me any of this stuff years later, I would have paid a lot more attention. But like when I was there, I wasn't looking like, oh, what's on the wall and where do these come from?
Right. Right.
It was just like, what's going on? Just watching what's going on. But it's weird. It's funny because, when people started like asking me specifically, oh, you were there, like, what did you see and what did you think? Then I really had to focus in and try to remember, like, I was only on the refrigerated set for like one day. And
Right.
that's when I met Max von Sydow
Hmm.
for the first time. And in looking back, I mean, I remembered that was a big thrill to me because I had just taken a class on Ingmar Bergman's film,
Oh yeah.
Silence
Hmm.
of God. It was called Ingmar Bergman and the Silence of God. And
Hmm.
I really didn't know Max von Sydow's work. Well, actually, I had seen him in The Greatest Story Ever Told,
Hmm.
because we were a Catholic family. When that came out, we went to see it. But I never connected Max von Sydow with
Right.
the priest and the exorcist. But I had just taken a course on Ingmar Bergman, The Silence of God. So I had seen all these great Bergman films that Max von Sydow starred in. And, I knew he was considered like a great actor. And I mean, he was like powerful. And so when I heard he was going to be in the movie, I was like, wow, that is really cool. And so when I got to meet him on the set, I never saw him in Georgetown except when, he came out of the cab, but I
Right.
never saw him being shot. So when my dad introduced me to him, I was like in awe of him.
Hmm.
And my recollection is because the makeup was so good, I thought he was,
Really
because
that old.
Bergman films look like they were really old films because they were done in black and white and they weren't as old
Hmm.
as they were when I thought he had just aged and I thought he was really like a man in his 70s.
Right.
How good the
Wow.
makeup was, is amazing.
Yep.
Even his hands, and I just remember he would, not that you asked me, but I remember it was one of the great experiences. He had such a presence to him. He was just like a distinguished, gentle, intelligent man,
Hmm.
but kind
Hmm.
too. It all came across just in the, he put out his hand and I shook it. And like he had these huge hands. I remember my hand, which was like a normal sized hand, just disappeared. You
Yeah, I
know,
totally believe that.
Well, we
Yeah.
didn't have a conversation. It was just like, oh, so nice to meet you. I love your films. I said, like I just
Hmm.
probably thought I was just saying it, but I had really just, but it was like he was Marin, like this
Hmm. Yeah.
holy man. And so I was always, that was one of the the great moments to me in the filming, and the time that I got to meet Lee J. Cobb. It
Right.
was when they were filming the scene up on the track. It was one of the first scenes, when Jason Miller's running around the track and
Mm-hmm.
Kimberman is sitting there,
Mm-hmm.
and so I used to work in this steak restaurant when I was in high school, parking cars. It was my summer job. And
Right.
Hobb used to come in, but I never had a conversation with him. But I admired him because I had seen him in On the Waterfront
Oh, wow. Yeah.
and Death of a Salesman. So I knew who he was. I knew he was like this great actor, really. And but I had only taken his keys and parked his car, and he'd give me a tip. I never talked to him. But so when I saw him on the set there, and I just had to talk to him, and I said,
I parked your car.
huh? Yeah, I did.
Remember,
Well,
that was the guy that parked
I
your
said,
car.
Mr. Cobb, I'm Bill Blatty's son. He said, oh, nice to meet you. I said, we've met before. I said, you won't remember me. But I said, I used to park your car. And he says, what do you mean?
That was you?
Yeah, I said, I worked at the steakhouse and you used to come in a lot. And I said, you were a pretty good tipper too, as I recall, something like that.
God, steak sounds good right
chat
now.
a lot, but he was again, first impressions can be misleading maybe, but he was like just the nicest, warmest person. And it comes across in like his acting, and like he was perfect for Kinderman. That whole
Mhm.
thing about his friendliness and loving films, and I mean, he's one of the best things in The Exorcist. He's so good
Mhm.
as Kinderman.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
those were like the experiences that like I kind of looking back treasured the most. These like personal contacts with people, and and Jason Miller. No, I'm repeating stories now. But
There's I meant to ask a while back. There's a kind of a little documentary called Miller's Tale. I don't know if you've seen it.
it's really weird. I haven't seen it, and I've wanted to see it. And because I've been to Scranton and I've seen the statue and I've talked to
Mhm.
people who knew him and so on. And of course, I met him and he signed a book to me. After he made The Exorcist, and he was living at Malibu for a while, and he came over. My dad was too. He came over to my dad's house one day, and I had been trying to find that championship season because I wanted to read it.
Mhm.
And I couldn't find a copy anywhere, like new or used. And so it was maybe kind of rude. I was only in my 20s. I said to him, hey, Mr. Miller, I said, I really want to read your book. I said, do you have an extra copy lying around anywhere? Because I'll pay for it. He says, oh, I'll send you a copy,
And he signed
What's
it.
the
And everything?
address? So I said, oh, okay, thanks. And then I thought, yeah, he's just saying, I'll send you a copy. And like a week later, this package comes and I open it. It's his copy.
Nice.
And he signed it to me. Michael, keep the faith. And then he signed it, Jason Miller, S.J., Society of Jesus,
Gotcha. Wow. That's
And
awesome.
so that was so. And anyways, there were some really nice people. All these people involved with the filming, the actors and so on, were really nice people,
Mhm. Yeah, I thought that back to that documentary, I thought it was pretty good. If you get a chance, it might be a good
Yeah,
watch.
I really have to see
Mhm.
it. I think it goes into the whole, the fact that, he kind of got tired of the life in Hollywood and didn't have the
Mhm.
lifestyle he wanted, and he missed his hometown and his friends, and he went back. And I tend to see it as like kind of a tragedy that, like, he went from the big time and then he went to like coaching, local dramas. And
Right.
I
Yeah.
think I think that that was the life that he wanted and that he loved there,
Mhm.
had a steady girlfriend, I think, and he was working on a novel. And he had his buddies and he had his local pub that he loved, and all this stuff.
Right.
you know.
Right. Yeah.
So it probably wasn't like, again, it probably wasn't a sad thing. He was probably happier there than he would have been in Hollywood. And
Well, once you watch it, let me know what you think.
yeah.
And
But
so
what is its take on him? I mean, is it a positive or is it kind of like,
it's kind of a mix. It kind of tries to put itself in the middle a little bit, I think. I mean, it doesn't really spend a lot of time on The Exorcist or anything, but it does
Yeah.
focus a little bit more on what he did after.
Hmm.
You know, he did a few other things. I
Yeah.
did come across something he did in '74, and I thought, what is this? This is almost like an extension of Father Caris or something. It was called Home of Our Own, where he portrayed another priest.
Oh,
But it's almost like looking at Father Caris all over again. But you know, it's made for television, and I found it on a YouTube. It was cut in like 4 parts,
hmm.
and I thought, and I saved it. I hadn't watched the whole thing, but it
Oh,
was supposed to be kind of like a docudrama on a situation with a boy's home in, like,
hmm.
I think it's New Mexico or Mexico, one of the two. So
Well,
he's portraying another priest again.
yeah, I didn't know that. You know, another thing, the only other thing other than I think The Exorcist that I've ever seen him in, I think it was called The Last of the Bells. It was based on a short story by F. Scott Fitzgerald. And he plays the lead in that. And his acting is fabulous. He's great, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so I've only seen him in the two things, and he was so good in both of them. Was
I think
he
he
in?
was in a vampire movie too.
Oh, really? Huh.
Yeah, I know he's in a few things.
Maybe something
And
else.
then he did some minor stuff later on for like
Oh,
smaller productions, and
yeah.
that's kind of touched on in that little documentary. But
Yeah, I definitely want to see that. I've been meaning to. And but the other thing I want to say about him, which I may have mentioned to you, is I was with my dad and him in Elaine's. You know, it's a place that I think Woody Allen was famous for, like playing the clarinet in. It was
okay,
it was like kind of a bar type restaurant in New York City in Manhattan. And
mm-hmm.
it was like an exclusive kind of place. But so this was while we were filming The Exorcist in, on the set. But anyway, one night my dad invited me and he was there. So was my dad and me and actually my girlfriend at the time and my dad's girlfriend at the time. So there were about 5 of us. But anyway, I I wish I could remember what he was talking about because I mean we were all drinking, and he was drinking more than anyone, but we were all pretty much smashed. But I was sober enough to realize what a brilliant guy he was. He was so intellectual and so literate. And he kind of like, my dad, obviously literate, smart guy, but he just totally dominated the conversation, but between himself and my dad, he was just like,
Mm-hmm.
it was, I remember and I was in college. I wasn't just a kid. I was like in my 20s. And I knew like smart stuff when I saw it. And he was so knowledgeable and he was so interesting. And I've never been around anybody who was such a great conversationalist and like just as like I have to use the word brilliant as he was. It wasn't about movies. It was all about literature. And sadly, I don't remember the details, but it was all about books and literature and poetry and people. And it was amazing.
Would you
And
say his mannerisms were about the same as what he put on screen when he talked?
well,
Or was it, did he feel like, okay, you're not Father Caris anymore, but did you get any little hints of maybe he put himself into the role where like any mannerisms when he was
well,
talking?
I can't say I really remember mannerisms. I remember that he was very lively and probably with a lot of gestures and a lot of facial
Mm,
expressions. He was a very animated
yeah.
person. So I don't remember the detail. The one thing I remember about that night is his wife, who was, Jackie Gleason's daughter,
Mm-hmm.
was really worried about him for some reason. And she kept calling. And I don't know, this was before cell phones. So I don't know. She must have been calling the restaurant directly or something. But she was trying to get him to come home. And he would take the call and then he would sit back down at the table and keep talking and stuff. And he was, and she called several times. And then eventually he got up to leave, and we were all worried about him. My dad and I were worried because he had had so much to drink, as had we all,
Oh, yeah.
But of course, he wasn't driving; he was getting a cab. But like
Mm-hmm.
we were all worried. Oh, geez, I mean, is he going to be okay? I mean, should we But we let him go, and I guess he got home safely.
Hmm.
But
Yeah, when you get a chance and see that, let me know what your thoughts are on it.
Yeah, I'm glad you reminded me, because I mean,
I'm gonna hit you up with, there's like 2 more questions if you're willing to.
okay, yeah. We've gone this
Use
far.
the
My
link.
wife has
I
already
know.
left me.
I know. I didn't
Even
count
the
on
pig
keeping
is
you
left.
this long,
Even the
but
pig is
we
gone.
got
I'm
some
looking, the pig is gone. I
late
think it's just
shows,
you
I
and me
guess.
now. I think it's
But
just you
very
and
good.
me.
Oh,
I
the
think any
pig
listener
went
is
too,
long
huh?
gone.
The pig went too, huh? Okay. Here, let's go with Richard B.
Can't
one more
believe, by
time.
the way, I'm gonna say goodbye to you now, because any second my
Let's see how long we can last on this one real quick. We'll answer it real quick. Was Mama Caris, Damien's mom, based on your grandmother? What is your memory of her that you can share?
Yeah. Is that a question, a live question?
Yes. These are
100
all lives after that one set up.
100%, 100% based on my grandmother, although my grandmother was Lebanese, not Greek. Why they changed it to Greek, I don't know, but she was Lebanese, and 100% based on her, Karis's grief upon her death, and guilt about feeling guilty about it, is all based on my dad and my grandmother's death. So she's what I remember about her is she was very warm, lively person, very intelligent. She made great Lebanese food when she would come over. You know, when I was a kid, she would cook and make all the stuffed grape leaves and kibbeh and all this stuff. Great cook, very intelligent. She had been college educated, you know, though she came from Damascus, from Syria. My dad was the only of their 5 children who was born in the United States. All the rest were born in Lebanon, in Beirut. Anyway, she was something of an eccentric, and she liked to play like practical jokes on people. You know, she was funny. She had a sense of humor.
Okay, I'm
Now,
gonna try to
no
push this one
battery.
real quick
Okay,
because we
all
had
right.
one question. I don't want to cut him off. Canadian brother, Canadian brother. I don't know if he meant to just type it once. What is the truth to the rumor that Father Caris was going to get up after falling down the stairs and go back into the house? I have not heard that one.
Wait a minute. The rumor that he was going to get up and go back into the house.
Yeah, after falling down the stairs. I don't know if
Oh,
that's in the film, or he meant the
yeah,
film or the novel, if there was
I
a mission.
never heard that, but almost sounds like a derivation of my dad's thing, where they're walking down the steps and somebody sees Karis and realizes he's still alive or something. I don't think there was any expectation that he would survive that fall.
Yeah, I don't
in
think he
any
was
version,
expected to either.
in any version, that was pretty spectacular. And I mean, you know, I was there when they filmed that, and I talked to Waters just before I went down, and Jason Miller was up there too, watching. We were all like wondering how they were going to do this without this guy getting hurt, you know?
Mhm.
I mean, it was a little bit scary, even though the steps were padded and everyone says that, it's still, those steps are steep, and to tumble down and that narrow, that was a dangerous stunt, you know?
Oh, I can imagine. Yeah.
So everybody was kind of like holding their breath. So it was pretty amazing. He had like a ramp that had been built, like this platform, if I remember, at the top of the steps. And he got up on this platform and just ran
And
to
he
the end of
drove
it
off.
and jumped. And then I guess he went halfway, and then they refilmed, you know, then they went down again. But there was a
Right.
huge crowd watching. It was very
Wow.
exciting because everybody knew this was like a big scene.
Mhm.
Yeah, everybody was there to watch that. Of all the scenes filmed, that was like the most exciting moment. Nobody knew that Jason, that Marin's arrival at the house was going to become like this iconic scene. It was no big deal. That was late at night. I saw them film it, but there weren't many people there. There was no
Right.
crowd watching. It was just this cab kept coming around, the fog machine's going. I think they finally didn't film it till like after midnight, maybe.
Wow.
I was watching them, you know, and I'd go do something else. I was across the way in my girlfriend's like dorm room, and we'd look out the window, and when are they gonna film it? And then, you know, finally they did, but nobody was there except the crew. I think we're
Yeah,
just,
I can't imagine. You know, I can see where it's like, oh, they're gonna do the jump scene, and then
yeah,
everybody gets all excited.
yeah. I think my computer is actually going to die any second, so maybe I'm going to sign off
Okay.
before
So,
we
oh
just
yeah, we'll
rudely interrupted.
we'll No, that's fine. Appreciate your time on this.
Sure.
I was shooting for 2 o'clock, but we kind of got some people coming in late and had questions. So I
Oh,
figured
yeah.
if you gave them a chance, and I guess we got everybody answered. There weren't any other questions after that. So
Okay. Yeah.
uh,
Okay. Good.
I do appreciate
Oh, no.
everybody showing up for this. I appreciate Mike participating in this. It's always great to have him on.
Well,
And
thanks. It's fun.
if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do like, subscribe, and share. Hit that bell icon, and we will see you again. And hopefully, I get another live going. Possibly, I'm hoping maybe to get a hold of the guy that was doing those the documentary, the 50th annual. Maybe he
Yeah.
might come on. Yeah, we'll see if
Yeah,
we can do that.
he'd be
Or
a
we
good
can bring Mike back on possibly after the holidays.
Mhm.
If anything new comes up. All right.
Yeah. Hey,
Well,
great to see you again. And thanks for everybody. Thanks for reading my dad's book and seeing his movie.
bye, Killer
Right.
Kane.
Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
Yeah, Merry Christmas.
And now if the pig were still here, I could do my
Yeah,
way, the sow is mine.
you bring the laptop over and meet the pig. It would, yeah.
All right, everybody. Take care.
Big pig. Oh, wow. All right. All right. Appreciate it. Thank you.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye.